If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this.
Truckers and drivers, what strange creature, supernatural being, paranormal phenomenon, or unexplainable sight have you encountered while driving on a haunted road?
Something in the road. We were traveling by car down a rural road in our town at around 10 p.m. We live in New England. There are houses around and some scattered streetlights here and there, but overall it is a dark road. All of a sudden, my headlights illuminate something about 50 feet in front of us in the opposite lane. It looked to be a grayish/pale color and looked to be in a crouching position. Imagine the way a gargoyle would crouch, and seemed to be the size of an average man. My girlfriend and I were the only occupants in the car, and we both saw this creature. We both agreed it looked like a mix between a gargoyle and something similar to what the Mothman apparently looks like. It had wings. I doubled back immediately in about 15 seconds after passing it. But the thing was gone. The road we were traveling on is surrounded by woods on one side and wooded swamp areas on the other. I have no idea what the duck we saw that night. What do you guys think? 20 plus years later and I still think about this. Back in the early aughts, I was living in Mesa, Arizona. Late one night I got into a big fight with my girlfriend at the time, so I decided to take a drive to blow off steam. I drove out east near the Salt River and was on a very dark and windy single-lane road. As I was coming around a corner, I saw a large animal figure just standing in the middle of the road. I hit the brakes, and as I approached slowly, I could tell that it was a massive black dog. I stopped about 10 feet in front of it, and it just stood there staring at me. It held eye contact for maybe 15 to 20 seconds before turning and very slowly walking across the road and out of sight. To this day I've never had a dog or any other animal look directly into my eyes like that and hold its gaze the way this dog did. I get chills every time I think about it. My husband and I were driving through Idaho towing a trailer after dark in the winter. We were near a river, so there was a lot of fog as we were driving. Out of the fog, a creature appeared. Its head was low and kind of swinging back and forth. Luckily my husband saw it in time and managed to swerve to miss it, not easy towing a trailer. For about a minute after, we were both silent. Then we both looked at each other and said, "What the hell was that?" For years we wondered because it was big enough to be a bear, but it wasn't. Finally we saw a video of a timber wolf, and boom, that's what it was, but it was huge. Its back was as high as the hood of the truck. It truly terrified us to our core. Second experience. Driving through Washington State and in the middle of the woods, I saw somebody dressed like they did in Bible times walking through them. He was walking through the woods, miles away from any human presence. So weird. In the early 90s, I was driving to work with my wife early in the morning in Point Siena, Florida. During the drive, on the left was a deep forest, and on the right was a small wooded area of about a mile before it reached US 192 near Disney. As we were driving, a creature about 6 to 7 feet tall, bipedal, loped across the road in front of us, out of the woods there, and without missing a beat, into the woods on the right. It freaked both of us to the core. Although we were not the only cars on the road, there were very few, and I am sure that others also saw it. There were no cars parked on the side of the road. Nobody had cell phone cameras, there was no YouTube or other media to prank anybody. Dude, I literally saw Bigfoot cross the road in front of my car. I don't care what anyone says, I was sober and wide awake, and both my wife and I saw it. Bigfoot is real. Something on the drive home from school, any explanation? I was driving home from school on a normal day. There was traffic, so I took a back road through the woods to get to my dorm. I heard screaming through a small path, so I stopped. Needless to say, I was terrified, but I was very curious and scared of what it was. I decided to hop out and investigate. I grabbed my knife that I had in my car and shined a flashlight down the path. I couldn't see anything, so I started down the path. Then I stopped. I don't know why, but I stopped about a quarter of a kilometer down the path for a solid 30 seconds. Then, my flashlight reflected some eyes of some creature about a kilometer away running at me fast, and I mean fast. I then saw its body get in the light, and I will do my best to describe it, as I didn't get a photo. It was very pale and tall, with no pigmentation and very malnourished. Its arms were disproportionately long compared to its body, and its hands had very long fingers with sharp claws as it approached me. I instinctively started running as fast as I could back to my car. I got in my car when it was very close to me and floored it out of that damned back road. Does anybody have any explanation of what I saw and what happened on that trail on a dark back road? A being tried to get our attention on the side of the highway. This was a few years ago. My husband and I were driving home from a friend's house a few towns over at about 3 a.m. We're night owls. The journey is mostly vacant highway, 2 lanes each way, with woods or liminal space and McMansion-style neighborhoods surrounding it. The road was dark, we were blasting music, a little stoned, and just having a nice drive. I was driving. Then, a young man appeared out of nowhere on the side of the road. Just a few yards ahead of us. He was dressed in a tattered tie-dye shirt and looked very unwell. He was tall and emaciated. Around us are empty fields, with houses probably 1/4 mile off the road. We're going like 80 miles per hour, so we reach him quickly, and as we do, he starts waving for help, leaning towards the road. And as we get closer, he stretches impossibly far toward our car. I was on the inside lane and had to swerve to avoid hitting him as his feet remained firmly on the side of the road. The gauntness of his face was exaggerated, his arms and torso were terrifyingly long, as he seemed to beg for help. I just accelerate as quickly as I can to get away, trying to avoid having a panic attack. I know my husband saw it too, as he's already calling 911 to report a person in distress on the side of the road, not even suggesting we go back to help. We pick up hitchhikers and the like regularly, so normally we would have stopped to help. It didn't seem malicious. But it also definitely wasn't human. I hope it is no longer suffering. I was driving at midnight down a road, and there was a nun walking on the side of the road. I drove past her, and when we were parallel, she shot a glare over at me. I couldn't see her face well, but I knew she looked at me. I drove past her, turned around, and drove past her again. And she did the same thing, kept jerking her head over in my direction as if to scare me. I turned around one more time to see her again, but she was gone. Also, a week ago I parked my car outside my house and was circled by a coyote for a few minutes. Once he started pawing at my car door, I laid on the horn, and he was off. Something is very wrong with the most haunted road in Colorado. A week ago a group of my friends and I took a drive along Riverdale Road in Colorado in honor of the spooky season, as it's one of the most haunted roads in the state. Everything was going well, laughing, joking, and just overall having a good time. Along the 11-mile stretch of road, there are 2 bridges you pass under. We didn't think much of the first one, but once we passed under the second bridge, I think it was E470 from what I can remember, I immediately felt sick to my stomach, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. I chalked it up to nerves and kept driving. Once we reached the end of the road without seeing anything, I flipped a U-turn and drove back down the road in the opposite direction in order to go home. My friend and I were still joking around when someone made a remark about getting out of the car as a test of courage. Of course no one wanted to, but my boyfriend, someone who's always willing to be brave, told me to pull over once we were back under the E470 bridge. So I did, and only he got out of the car, but something in my gut told me if he stayed out there any longer, there was no way he would live. I immediately opened my door and yelled at him to get back in the car. He did. Once we passed back under the bridge, all sickness I felt immediately lifted. I keep having dreams of that night, and in every single one of them he dies under that bridge. There's something very wrong under that bridge, something horrible happened there, and I don't know what it is. Creature crossing the street. This is not my story, but my grandma's. She has shared this story with me and others for so long, yet no one has been able to provide an explanation. This happened about 30 years ago. She was driving home from work one night when her encounter happened. She lives in a very rural area in West Virginia. There are a lot of hills and turns on the way to her house. She got off work late and it was about 11 p.m. She was coming around a certain turn that on the right goes around a church with a graveyard. When you finish going around the turn, there's a house that sits down over the hill on the left. When coming around the turn, she had to slam on her brakes. She saw a creature on her side of the road that she described as being about 3 feet tall, with long silver hair covering its body, while its bare legs resembled those of a chicken or bird. The creature didn't turn to look at her or the car. It simply crossed the road, walked on its 2 legs, and went down the hill toward that house. Later on, she told a friend at work about what she saw that night. She says they never talked much about it again, but about 15 years later, the same friend she told called her up to tell her that her daughter was driving in the same area and saw the same creature. Her friend's daughter reported that this time the creature was sitting on the front steps of the church and wearing a blue jacket. Every other detail was the same, the silver hair, bird legs. I'm just curious if anyone else has ever seen anything like this creature or may know what it could have been. I've tried Googling it and have found other creatures spotted in WV but never anything like this. In September 2022, while traveling southbound on SC 165 in Ravenel, South Carolina, just south of Highway 17 and across the railroad tracks about 150 yards away, I saw a right arm extending down to the waist of an individual at around 9 p.m. The speed limit is only 30 miles per hour there. It looked like it had a dark calico hair color similar to an Australian Shepherd dog coat. It was on the right shoulder of this 2-lane, SC 165, road. It glided into the brush of this wooded area just on the north side of Mellichamp Branch Creek. I observed the creature from its right shoulder down to the top of its thigh. The hair looked dusty dirty and was mostly a dark brown to black, with gray streaks and tan brown spots every few inches. Had it been still, I could have mistaken it for a tree. There is a Food Lion grocery store a couple hundred yards north of this spot, which would be a good dumpster diving spot for discarded foods. There are 2 small restaurants in the same mini mall as Food Lion, just west of that. Its right arm appeared to be bent as if holding something in front of it. It wasn't huge, probably about 7 feet tall and lanky. I wish I had been there a few seconds earlier and might have seen its head. I have heard them scream/howl to each other in this area. I have heard 3 of them communicating with each other, and they sounded as if they were within a few hundred yards of one another. They are probably cruising the neighborhood surrounded by woods in search of food. There are a few houses with horses and other livestock, from which they could steal food. Lady in the road. About 5 years ago, my brother and I were driving home from my brother's friend's house that was right up the road from our house. It was my brother's friend's birthday, so we stayed out pretty late, approximately 3 a.m. My brother was driving, and I was in the passenger seat when we came around a curve. Standing in the road, right next to the curb, was a woman. Her face was pale, her hair was messy with leaves stuck in it, she was wearing raggedy old pajamas, and she was staring up the road into nothingness. My brother went around the curve and almost hit the lady with his car, but she didn't flinch, she just kept staring up the road. As we passed her, I looked away and said, "Jesus Christ," because my brother almost hit her. My brother looked at me as if I were crazy and asked what had happened. I said, "Did you not just see that lady you almost hit?" He replied no, he hadn't seen her. I have not had another experience like this since, but I don't need one. I am 100% convinced I saw a ghost that night. It's just a truck. My grandfather died in 2019 after 4 years of wasting away with a terrible illness. On his deathbed he was adamant we were to get his pickup truck after his passing. We've all been terribly protective over this truck, it was his baby. He bought it brand new in 2006 and only put 45,000 miles on it in the time he had it. He always made sure it was fully up to par and maintained. Not a scratch on it. Shortly after we received it, my mother and I were waiting in a CVS drive-thru when an old, beat-up Ford rolled into the back of us. Not terribly hard, but enough to dent the bumper pretty damn good. It was an older gentleman, and he was apologizing profusely. He explained he had just gotten out of the hospital and had been looking for some paperwork on his passenger seat and hadn't realized the truck was rolling. He was obviously exhausted and unwell. When we exchanged insurance, it became even more apparent this man had fallen on hard times. My mother and I didn't really want to go after this guy, it was obvious he was very poor. But we also had guilt over my grandfather's truck now having a terrible dent in the bumper, and though it was cosmetic, the repairs would be at least $300, and we don't have that kind of money. That night, for the first and last time, I dreamed of my grandfather. He was healthy with a beer in his hand, and we were sitting in the backyard of his house. We made small talk, and eventually he asked if we were enjoying the truck. I told him what happened, and he chuckled, took a sip of his beer, and said, "You know, it's just a truck." I woke up after that. That day my mother told me she decided not to go after the guy, and when I asked why, she said that I may have thought it was silly, but that night she had dreamed of my grandfather, sitting in his backyard with a beer in hand, smiling, and telling her not to worry about it. It is just a truck. Someone walking in the road? Okay, so I've never been a believer. But tonight I think I can say that has changed. I was driving back from my friends along the country lanes and coming towards a village called Bretford in Warwickshire. I know the local hamlet of King's Newnham is meant to be haunted, as I know the area well. In the middle of the lane I could see a man walking towards the village, so I began slowing down. I thought, why the hell is he walking in the middle of the road this late at night? And he didn't seem to be moving out of the way, my headlights were on full beam. As I was getting closer, I was slowing right down till I must have only been doing about 10 miles per hour. He then just disappeared. I mean, literally just vanished. I stopped and looked round and had a little panic to myself for a few moments before I carried on. I got back to my parents and was shaken up, I still am. About 12 years ago, after a night out, I saw something similar in another village close by but put that down to the alcohol I had consumed that evening. My friend who was driving that night is still adamant about what we saw, but I just brushed it off. Now it seems a very similar thing has happened again, but I was on my own this time. I doubt I'm getting any sleep tonight. Creepy story from the backroads of Cape May County. About 10 years ago, a reputable friend of mine, a no-nonsense sort of guy, told me about an experience of his with a couple other mutual friends during their drive from Gloucester County down the shore. This was during the middle of the night, perhaps they were on their way for a fishing or crabbing adventure, but I don't exactly recall. What I do recall is that somewhere after 55 ends, they took a back road they were unfamiliar with at the time. Along this road, something caught their attention. It was a group of several people, they said women, in long black robes standing in a circle in an open section of the field. I wish I could elaborate, but it has been a long time since I picked his brain about it. One of the reasons I believe it is because it came up in casual conversation a year after it happened, and he never dramatized anything about it when speaking of it. I just wanted to share this in case anyone else has a similar experience or insight. Never stop for hitchhikers. I had to give an employee a ride home from work one day. Her ride bailed on her, and her parents were out of town, and she was 15. I wasn't leaving her outside at night to find her own way home, miles away, and I checked in with the owner of the company first to cover my butt. On the way to her house, we passed by what looked like a young blonde woman in a white hoodie with large patches of red. I wasn't paying close attention as the driver. The teenager asked me to stop, and I said, "No way," and then glanced in the rearview mirror, and there was no girl there. It was a gated community, so unless she jumped a 9-foot stone wall, I have no idea what we saw. But I will not drive through that neighborhood anymore. On other driving-related incidents, I worked a job where I did a lot of driving and passed through this small town. I caught a glimpse of someone on the side of the road, a brunette, in a fancy prom/quinceañera/pageant looking dress, huge skirt, yellow, and I assumed she was there for a photo shoot. 12 hours later, on the way home, I passed through that same town and was chilled to the bone to see a cross on the side of the road covered with artificial yellow flowers. That one's going to stick with me for the rest of my life. I'm an OTR, over the road, truck driver who owns and operates their own truck. The strangest thing that happened to me while driving across the country was going through Cabbage Pass in Oregon. It's late fall 2016, and it's dark outside. I'm driving from Florida to Portland, Oregon, with a load of beer. It's 2 a.m., and the weather is cold. I had just left a truck stop on I-84 in Utah. I can't remember the name, but it has a Thunderbird as its logo and is probably on or very close to a reservation. My wife and I had just eaten and were in the driver lounge enjoying our very late lunch. This happens a lot in the business. Anyway, we finish and go back to my tractor. Everything looks like it does on any other night. We start moving and get into the pass. Things start to get weird here. There is another trucker ahead of me in the distance. He isn't going very fast. I thought it was a heavy load like mine. It's starting to snow a little. I can see the company logo clearly as I put up the pass. It's a rig from Prime Incorporated, I think to myself, that explains the slow pace up the mountain. I can't seem to get past him, no matter how close I get. I lost sight of him after a few turns on the pass. At the time, I didn't think much of it. The bad thing is that he probably hit the grade and coasted down the next few turns. Whatever. I get to the Oregon side of the pass and hit the pilot down there. Wife has to go to the bathroom. We stop and go inside. I didn't see any trucks from Prime in the lot. Thought he would just keep going. Until I heard a driver from Swift talk. He said that a Prime driver was trying to run him off the road. Around that time, an older driver starts to talk. A Prime driver went over the pass near the top about 10 years before I got my CDL. I saw a tractor that was purple and black. Wow, I saw a purple and black Prime tractor on the way. It's a coincidence. It has to be. I say this, and the older driver gives me a look. "Did you pass him?" The driver asked, and I said I couldn't. He turned white. I'm getting impatient now. What the hell? Hey driver, what the hell is going on? A purple and black Prime goes over the pass. What happened? It looks like he lost control when he hit black ice and went off the top of the pass. He is dead. People have been seeing the tractor go up the pass and not seeing it come back down. Any place. I was going to leave this conversation, but the driver asked if my CB was on. No, it's 2 a.m., and my wife is tired. Be a little rude. The older driver says that probably saved our lives. A few weeks before, there was a deadly accident on the pass, at the top, on black ice, after talking to a driver on the CB. That was enough to make me never want to go over Cabbage Pass again. A ghost trucker? No, thanks, duck off. It's hard to scare us, but when our lifelines become liabilities, that's scary. For a few days, I didn't get much sleep. That stuff scared me. My husband is not a trucker, but a long time ago he was driving in the night before a religious holiday in the country he was working in, and a strange man asked for a ride. It was acceptable, and fairly safe, back then to give rides to strangers. He asked him to go straight without specifying a location, then they came near a hospital, and suddenly he started shouting, "Here, here, stop here. Just let me continue walking here." His shout was so sudden that my husband almost crashed and almost missed the entrance. It was very dark in the parking lot. He still insisted on leaving his car here. When he stopped, just 1 second later, while my husband was looking around trying to comprehend why the hell that person wanted to be dropped here, he disappeared. My husband almost lost his mind looking for him. He even left his car and went around it, thinking that guy was trying to prank him. He asked him to stop in the middle of the parking lot near nothing to hide in or enter. He just vanished. It was really scary. While on a late night drive, my friend and I experienced missing time. A friend of mine and I were out driving late one evening. The night air was warm, and we decided to drive to the river a few miles outside of my tiny town. In order to get to this river, you have to follow a narrow road down a hill that's intersected by train tracks about halfway down/up. We do our thing at the river, the night goes on, and we decide it's time to head back to town and settle in for the night, as it's well past midnight and we both have to work in the morning. We begin our ascent up the winding road, cross over the train tracks, and continue up the hill, and as we are about to turn onto the highway and I'm flipping my turn signal, we find ourselves back at the railroad tracks that we had already crossed over. Now, there is no possible way to loop back around on this hill. It's a narrow road with a steep drop-off to one side and a heavy incline on the other, both sides covered in shale. That alone rules out the possibility of me drowsily making a wrong turn and finding my way back to the tracks. Normally, I would laugh this off and chalk it up to myself not paying attention, spacing out, etc. The thing that makes me believe it was something other than human error is the fact that when we reached the train tracks the second time, both my co-pilot and I were visibly confused and simultaneously looked to each other in an "are you seeing this too, or am I crazy?" kind of way. I'm really unsure of what to think of this. I've never experienced anything like it, and I'm hoping some of you here have had similar experiences or can drop some knowledge on me. I saw a small white creature on my drive home from work. Can somebody help me pinpoint it? It was just after 11 p.m., midsummer. I have a long commute home, and I was not particularly tired that night, so I can't chalk it up to fatigue. I was driving down a long rural side road with farm fields on both sides, and if you've seen roads in northern Canada, you know that the ditches on the sides are real deep. I had my high beams on because this stretch of road has no lights, so at night it's extremely dark. I've had deer jump out to cross the road before, but I saw something that was 100% without a doubt not a deer. Far up ahead, on the right side, I saw a short, white figure standing at the top of the ditch like deer do when they are about to jump out, so I slowed down, and as I approached, I realized this thing was way skinnier than it should be. Like starved skinny, it stood like a baby deer with the same body shape except its ribs were popping out. Its stomach was very thin, like if you've ever seen a starving dog. It had no tail, and its head was almost totally round, unlike a deer, and it did not have any ears that I could see. This thing was pale white like a sheet of paper, and its eyes did not glow. It wasn't the high beam's reflection making it so white because as I passed by and my headlights were no longer on it, it was still white as snow. The scariest part was, I swear to God, I think it had human-like hands instead of hooves/feet like a deer. It stared at my car as I passed by, and at first I gunned it because the sight of it freaked me out so bad. And then I thought I should turn around to look for it. So I pulled a U-turn and drove back quite a ways, but it was definitely gone. So then I just continued on home, which was about another 20-minute drive. This encounter bothered me the whole time. When I got home, my wife, sister-in-law, and brother were all standing on the front porch chatting, and I immediately told them what I saw and started Googling. But I could find nothing, and they think I'm crazy. Any help identifying this creature I saw would be so appreciated. I still drive that road twice a day. I always scan that section of the road now, but I haven't seen it again. Creepy experience with an unknown creature. When I go for long bike rides, I'm often riding around in super rural areas. Recently, the weather was nice, so I went for a long ride. Halfway into it I decided to find a space to sit and have lunch. I rode next to the river until I came to a dead end. It was pretty far from anything. In front of me was the river, behind me was the forest. Anyway, as I was eating, I heard this loud guttural growl. I stood up and looked around but couldn't see anything. But I could sense something was watching me. It was pretty freaky. I'd be very interested to hear others' experiences with wildlife here in Japan. I'm pretty sure it was a black bear or wild boar, but who knows, it could have been the Japanese chupacabra. I saw a ghost whilst driving in the countryside with my friends. This was a couple years back now, but I was driving to a small cottage in the countryside. Whilst driving through the countryside with my friends, one beside me and one in the left passenger seat, we decided to turn on the radio and listen to music. It was around 12:30 in the middle of the night. We were all minding our own business, one sleeping, friend in passenger seat, and my friend and I in the front. I was driving at the speed limit, cruising, when my friend and I saw a small boy, I would say 10 to 11, all alone at this time of night. He was notably dressed in a shirt and black jeans and had black hair. Keep in mind we had our headlights on. We pulled over, around maybe 50 feet, from where the boy stood. My friend exited the car and started to walk back and toward the boy where he was last seen, but he was gone, almost like he vanished. A ghost, perhaps? My friend even checked to see if he was hiding or had run away, but no traces. Does anyone, or has anyone, experienced this phenomenon? Gives me the creeps. I parked beside a cemetery and was scared half to death. Pulled over for a break on the way to Melbourne from Sydney at a truck stop. No street lights or anything, pitch black. At the stop, there were no other trucks or cars present. I turn off my lights. I switch the truck off. Do the curtains. Lock the truck from both sides. Jump into bed. I set my alarm and set my phone above me in the compartment. I was rolling over from side to side for around 5 to 10 minutes. I couldn't get to sleep due to it being prime summer temperatures, reaching around 30 degrees at night. I'm looking up at the ceiling, mentally planning out the day ahead. Suddenly the passenger side door opens up slightly, and the cabin light turns on. What the duck? Now, the truck is a fairly late model and in pristine condition, so there's no question about the door being faulty or anything. I just sat there for what felt like an eternity, expecting someone to come up and see me sitting there with the solid rod in my hand that we use for tightening belts. No one came up, nor was there any noise at all. Just quiet, eerie silence. I grabbed my torch, jumped down, and walked around the truck. No other trucks were around. Nor were there any cars. It was just me and my fully loaded B-double. After around 5 to 10 minutes of getting ducked around with, I locked up and went to bed again. Woke up the next morning, yawned, and fixed myself up along with the bed. I opened the curtains and, to my dismay, saw that there is a cemetery next to the stop where I parked. Hunger and laziness all escaped upon realization, grabbed keys, duck putting shoes on, duck putting pants on, switched the truck on, and just got the duck out of there ASAP. It was a night in October, and it was one of the really dark nights, and the moon was unusually golden and larger than normal, and I remember it like it was yesterday because when certain events really scare you to your core, you tend to remember every vivid detail. I was 19, and I was living in Chesapeake, Virginia, right off of Mount Pleasant Road, so this was about 18 years ago, but I remember it like it was yesterday. My ex and I took a joyride because Chesapeake was mostly fields back then. We made a left where the old red antique barn is and headed down Blue Ridge Road, everything seeming normal until we hit a patch of fog, a thick fog, which was strange because there was no fog anywhere else, or on that road for that matter. My instincts told me something was wrong, very wrong, so I told my ex to turn around immediately. Blue Ridge Road has fields on both sides that go for miles basically in the middle of nowhere, and the road is small, so it's hard to turn around. Finally, we started to go in the direction we came from, and all of a sudden, the voices started, "Help me." The voices were so loud that we both turned to look at each other in sheer fear. It was many voices screaming in agony, and it just got louder and louder. I could hear it vibrating off the car. And we just floored it for dear life. I wonder to this day what would have happened if we had gone through that patch of thick fog, because whatever it was, they were definitely trying to get our attention. Any background information for Blue Ridge Road? Any other stories? Spooky roads. So I live in rural northwest England. About 40 minutes drive from me is a place called the Trough of Bowland. It's basically country lanes that wind on for miles and miles in the middle of nowhere. It's a lovely place to visit with places where you can stop by little streams and have picnics and paddle in the stream. I've been going with my family ever since I can remember. So when I was about 6, we had been out for a day, as it was a nice summer's day. We had a good day having a picnic and playing in the stream, etc. There was me, my brother the same age as me, my older brother who would have been 15 at the time, and my dad and stepmom. We had been out all day, and it was late evening when we decided to set off back home. As you could imagine, the roads are pitch black at nighttime, being in the middle of nowhere, all at the national speed limit, 60 miles per hour. So we're driving along, me and my brothers in the back, my dad driving, and my stepmom in the passenger seat. When suddenly my stepmom shouted, "What's that?" And my dad did a full emergency stop as if we were going to hit something. As we all looked up, we saw a woman in a gray/white dress step out into the road as the car was screeching to a stop. We didn't stop in time, but as we collided with her, a white mist just drifted across the bonnet of the car before disappearing. This left us all more puzzled than scared, and we all still remember it now, 12 years on. But that's not the only freaky experience we've had in that area. About 2 years ago, when I was 16, my brother, our girlfriends, and I took a drive over there in my brother's car. We were on a relatively straight bit of road, and my brother knows the roads very well, so we were going at the speed limit, 60 miles per hour, when suddenly I saw out my window a girl dressed all in white. It was enough for me to tell my brother to stop. I made him reverse back to where I had seen the girl, and there was nothing there. He wound his window down and called out into the darkness, but nothing. It was incredibly freaky, and we still talk about it every time we go over that way. I am 18 now and still remember both experiences vividly and get goosebumps when talking about them. I was driving a dump truck a couple miles south of Ardmore, Oklahoma. I was working fairly late this night, and it was dusk when I dumped out the gravel that I needed to deliver. On the way back to I-35 from this back road, it got dark on me, and I really needed to piss, so I pulled off the road and walked a few yards into the tall grass to do what I needed to do. After a couple of seconds I heard a woman's voice scream, "Hey! I need help. Help me over here." I yelled back, "Where are you?" And it responded again with, my first name, "Help. Please come help me over here." I had never run to the truck and booked it out of a place so fast. This is actually not the first time I've heard of skinwalker stories in the Ardmore area either, but I experienced it for myself that night. This is my time to shine. There's a bridge outside my hometown where a young woman was found dead in the 70s. She fits my description, so it always creeped me out. The husband has been arrested a couple years ago. I went down there a lot in high school because it's really creepy. It's out in the middle of nowhere. The area is flat, but since it's a river, you suddenly turn a corner going down a small hill, and wham, bridge. So 10 years ago, I took my ex-fiancée out there one night to see how creepy it was. There are directions or signs, and you have to remember the turns, though you can also follow the roads on your GPS, so it's not as hard to find as it was in high school. We take our first turn and are starting to go downhill. I suddenly see this massive white thing, like a large being, fly over the car and land in the trees on my side. I could feel it sitting there looking at us. I promise you that I did not react. I didn't jump or flinch or say anything. But my ex slammed on the brakes at the exact same moment. He asked me what I saw, and I said, "Turn around. Turn around. The only way is to go all the way down to the river and cross the bridge, then drive along some low river bottom land before going all the way back up and then out to the highway home. But it's at least 10 to 20 minutes driving on rural one-lane roads." I told him not to say what he saw until we got back up to the farmland. We get back up, and I tell him to say it at the exact same time. We both saw something large and white fly over the car and land in the trees. I love spooky things, and someone said they think they saw a great white owl once that looked like a ghost. That would make sense for the time of day and it hunting and then flying back to a tree. But I can't tell you how scared I felt that something creepy was perched in the tree watching us. Something in the road. About 10 years ago, my wife, then my girlfriend, we'll call her Teresa, was hanging out with me and my 2 nephews. Nothing exciting, just the usual weekend chill. Then I got a text from my sister around 10:30 p.m. to bring one of my nephews home so he could watch his younger brothers. My wife offered to do it, so she and my nephew headed out. It's only about a 10-minute drive. After 20 to 25 minutes, I see headlights turn on at the end of my driveway. If it was Teresa, I thought it odd that she would arrive without any lights on. The car raced up the driveway shortly after the headlights came on. I knew something was up. I met Teresa at the front door, and she came in and immediately closed the door and locked it. I asked her what was wrong. She turned around and was ghost white. She said as she made the final bend near my house, there was something white in the road. It looked like a man crouched down in the middle of the road holding a bag or something. As she approached it, it didn't really move, but she said she could feel it looking at her. Once she was next to it, the car completely shut off. Lights, engine, the whole nine. Thankfully she had enough momentum to coast into my driveway, where everything turned back on. She restarted the car and drove up as quickly as possible. It took a while to calm her down, but she finally was able to relax. This was the first time she saw something and definitely not the last. I think this was the day she realized she's sensitive to ghosts/spirits. Additionally, she experiences unsettling feelings before encountering something supernatural or anticipating a negative event. On my way to Vegas from Reno via 95, pitch black night, looking to take a nap, and I notice chain up areas and decide to hit the next one I come across. I see a truck in the next one, so I pulled in about 20 yards behind him and shut everything off. Middle of nowhere. Set an alarm for 2 hours and get in the sleeper and start watching The Sopranos until I fall asleep. I wake up to a tap 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 on my sleeper window. I'm still pretty much asleep at this point, so I listen, and after a while, tap tap tap. I peek through my curtains, and the other truck is gone. I look around my windows and windshield through a hole in my curtains but can't see shit because it's pitch black. Close them up and lie back down. About 10 minutes go by, and I hear it again. I yelled, "What?" And there was no answer. Hello? Nothing. So I decided to get ready, jump in the driver's seat, crank, and go. Didn't even let the QC boot up properly. As soon as I turn my headlights on, I notice a pair of shoes up ahead. Didn't notice them before. I looked in both mirrors, didn't see anything, and said, "Duck it," pulled the horn twice, and took off. Never been so spooked in my life. I am not sure what it was, and I do not care to find out. My first thought was, aliens. A friend told me this story. I'm from New Mexico, and so is he. He was driving back home from Farmington to the I-40 interchange at night. On this stretch of road, there is nothing for miles. As he's driving, he sees a man in the distance walking on the side of the road. The truck's headlights illuminate the man. As he passes the man, he sees it's a Navajo-looking man wearing a denim jacket with cut-off sleeves, a pair of jeans, and a folded red bandana around his head, walking with his back to the truck. My friend doesn't see the man's face. He continues to drive a few more miles. Once more, his headlights illuminate a man walking on the side of the road. Again it's a Navajo man, wearing a denim jacket with cut-off sleeves, jeans, and a red bandana on his head. Once again he doesn't get a clear view of his face. His wife, who was in the passenger seat, had fallen asleep. He woke her up and told her what he'd just seen. She didn't believe him until the truck lights illuminated a man walking on the side of the road again. He was a Navajo man wearing a denim jacket with no sleeves, jeans, and a red bandana on his head. The incident happened smack dab in the middle of Skinwalker country. My friend swears it was the same person each time. I'm a truck driver bringing goods across the country and back for a decently good paycheck, but I doubt I'd be returning to that line of work anytime soon. My father was a trucker when I was young. He always told me it was a good job. You're out on the road with the fresh air, you're your own boss, the pay's good. I thought it sounded great, so I wanted to take up trucking and delivering stuff when I got older. When I graduated high school, I did everything I needed, passed the tests and everything, and soon enough I was out on the road. It was amazing for a year or two. I made good money, and it was nice to be on the road and even have my own little room basically in my truck, but there's a reason I said was, though. I doubt I'm ever driving another truck again after what happened to me one winter night. It was around 2 in the morning when it happened. I was driving down the nearly empty highway with the occasional car passing by when I saw what I thought looked like a giant skinny creature running through the trees in the woods to the right of my truck. I thought nothing of it because I was extremely tired after having driven a lot the past few days and shrugged it off as my mind messing around with me. An hour later, around 3, there were no more cars, just me on the highway driving down. Moments later I saw the same figure running through the trees again, and I started questioning if it was really in my head at this point. My thoughts were interrupted as a long, slender hand reached out of the trees in front of me, slamming into the front of my truck and stopping my truck immediately. The hand had long, blood-stained claws, and I saw another hand creep over the barrier of the highway as a pair of dead eyes stared through the trees. I attempted to get out of the car, but the creature flipped the truck over on its side, causing me to slam my head into the dash and go unconscious. My eyes opened a few moments later to see a giant creature coming out of the forest and climbing over the barrier. It was a very skinny, pale white creature with extremely long and skinny limbs. I desperately tried to open the door and get out onto the truck's side, but I passed out again. When I woke in the hospital, they told me I was found a few feet away from my truck, lying on the highway with a bad head injury. Obviously, when I told them about what I saw, they brushed it off with excuses like it was all in your head or your truck hit something and flipped. I didn't believe a word they said, though. I know what I saw. I'm currently sitting in the hospital bed typing this, and I'm still mortified by what I saw on that road in the darkness. My truck was totaled, and there were no signs of anyone or anything near the accident site. I plan to quit my job as a trucker and move on to something else, but I'm horrified of what could happen if I were to drive again. I just won't ever feel safe on the road again after what I encountered. What do I do? My time to shine. I was driving the graveyard shift along Interstate 80 west from Pennsylvania to California. Somewhere around Chicago at 1 a.m. I saw a tiny woman who had to be methed out to the gills dancing and waving her arms around on the side of the interstate. No backpack or luggage or bags of junk hanging off her like the usual hobo does, just an intense smile as she danced around on the breakdown lane. I laughed and figured someone would either pick her up or plow into her. The next day I see her doing the same thing in Nebraska. How on earth did she manage to get this far? Someone is driving her around. Or she has a car. Or I'm drinking way too many monsters, and I'm losing it. Whatever. No way she'll be in Wyoming. Boom. No car in sight or anyone near that could have helped her out. There she is west of Laramie doing the same crazy dance. Miles from anything. At this point I'm tempted to stop and ask her if she's okay. I tell myself, if I see her again, I'll see if she's just a traveling wingnut or some kind of trucker-eating vampire tweaker. The next 2 days on the West Coast, I'm on edge, eyeballing every exit and off-ramp looking for the crazy smiling lady. Nothing. Still creeps me out. Been a gig worker/driver for a number of years now. But when I first started my side hustle back in 2016, I wasn't all too familiar with my street names and locations around Sacramento. I remember picking up a passenger near Exposition, where Costco is located. This was at 3:45 a.m. The gentleman wore a gray sweater, a black shirt, and blue jeans. He also appeared to be losing some hair at the top. His skin was a little pale, lighter than usual. I remember him saying, "Thank you" when he opened the door and sat in the backseat. The ride was quiet and the roads were empty this early in the morning, so the drive was quick. Soon I found myself a little north of Rio Linda heading east on Alverta. I can't remember the exact name of the drop-off point, but the ride ended at an abandoned brick building with one light post shining in front. This was a lone building in a long stretch of empty road. The gentleman exited my car without saying a word and walked behind my vehicle towards the light in front of the brick building. I was a little creeped out, so in the mere seconds of his exit, I began to pull forward. As I drove away, I looked at my rearview mirrors to see if the man had come to the light, and he had vanished. Disappeared altogether. He was nowhere to be seen. Later that morning, I looked into my app to see if I was paid for that ride, and it did not register. No ride was registered at 3:45 a.m. Still brings me chills thinking that I might have transported a spirit that morning. My mom recounted one such experience. It was during the 90s, she regularly drove every week to a nearby town about 40 minutes away from home to sell clothes. She had to drive this 2-lane road and pass over a bridge that spanned over a small creek that was also a bend on the road, going up a small hill. In this location, she says one afternoon, a few minutes before twilight, she was driving back as usual and saw one man standing right beside the bridge railing. It was a bit odd because there was only a very narrow space between the railing and the road, and the ledge was several meters above the creek, making it somewhat dangerous for someone to be standing there. Another odd thing was that he was with his back to the road, as if he was watching something on the creek and the hill. She thought maybe it was someone who wanted to enjoy the view. The man was clothed with a shirt and jeans, but they looked like they were dirty, just like a mechanic's clothing would be stained with oil. Maybe just a vagrant. She continued driving normally, and when she passed right by where the man was, it was as if some kind of force pulled the car towards the railing. She struggled to control the car, had to pull the steering wheel with all her strength, and eventually regained control, continuing without incident but feeling scared. When she arrived home, she was still shocked by the incident. While I was waiting for her at my grandparents' house, around the age of 11 or 12, the first thing she did upon arriving was to tell my aunt and me this story. It doesn't end there. There were at least 2 more incidents exactly like the first one. She had to go to the other town at least twice a week, and she saw the same man standing there, and the same strange pull to the car happened, as if it wanted to send her out of the road. Another important detail is that these incidents only occurred when she was returning home in the late afternoon or during twilight. Nothing happened while she was driving to the other town. After experiencing this several times, she became terrified of driving there. However, it was our only source of income, and as a divorced mother with a child to care for, she had no choice but to go. She sought help from our local priest, who was also a friend of the family. We were very Catholic, and told him the whole story. He said it was a suffering soul, and that maybe he died there and was still attached to this world and wanted to take more people with him. He reflected on the situation and said he would pray for the soul to find rest, advising my mom to pray every time she passed by that bridge for her protection. About this time, as more people in the family knew about it, we found out what had happened at that bridge. About a month before the first incident, there was a terrible accident right at that bridge where a tanker and another big truck collided with one another. The tanker had exploded, and the driver had burned alive. I don't remember, but there might have been more victims. With this knowledge, we developed a more plausible explanation. The trucker's soul might still be attached to that location and could have exerted a force on my mom's car, possibly because she was able to see him. My mom is very sensitive, and I believe she has some psychic abilities, which she repressed in her youth. So she investigated in the newspaper if the trucker was named. It was, so she asked for a few masses to be celebrated, asking for the trucker's soul to rest in peace and everyone else that could have died in that accident. She prayed every single time she crossed that bridge for a few weeks, and she would never again see that man on it. My brother and I had a scary experience at the same time, both in separate cars, and with neither of our parents seeing what we saw. When I was around 17 years old, my family was moving from Reno to Las Vegas, driving our car and moving truck down Highway 95. I am currently in the car with my mother. My brother and father are in the moving truck. It's a bright and sunny 11 a.m. in the Nevada desert. I'm napping in the passenger seat, when near Hawthorne, Nevada, I slowly wake up, groggily look around, and out of the corner of my eye I see a little kid on the side of the road. Our car zooms by where the kid was on the side of the road. I try to look in the rearview mirror for the kid, but he is gone. I ask my mom if she saw a little kid on the side of the road, and she says, "No, there wasn't any kid, you probably dreamed it." I shrug and continue watching out the window. My mom and dad decide to stop and meet for lunch at a McDonald's somewhere along the road. We arrive at the McDonald's, but dad and my brother have not arrived yet. Finally, dad and my brother come in, and my brother loudly says, "We saw a ghost." My dad and brother tell the story of how my brother saw a Native American boy on the right side of the road. He was green, pale, and see-through and had his mouth open. My dad, driving the truck, did not see the ghost boy. My mom pauses and says, "Wait a minute, Op saw a kid on the side of the road too." My mom and dad start to compare notes about when my brother and I, respectively, saw the kid by the road. Apparently we both told each respective parent that we saw the kid at around the same spot, but neither parent saw the ghost boy. My dad and I are both very skeptical when it comes to the paranormal. I still don't really believe in ghosts or the afterlife, but I somehow can't explain how my brother and I saw similar things on the side of the road that day, when neither parent saw anything. My scary story as a tow truck driver. I was an RTTO, registered tow truck operator, for about 2 years. It was a great job, pay was good, with lots of overtime and on-call shifts. I got into the career because of shows I watched as a kid, like Highway Through Hell. So when I got the chance to go into the field, I jumped on it. The first month was good. I gained a lot of experience and new skills. Part of our job as RTTO was emergency calls with police and fire for crash scenes and impounds. So we saw a lot of tragic stuff, DUI fatalities, hit and runs, non-DUI fatalities, etc. The job can be very emotionally and mentally draining and can mess you up if you're not careful. However, there's another kind of aspect to the job not a lot of drivers talk about. The paranormal, odd, or off calls are stuff that unsettles you. Almost every tow truck driver has experienced it. It was a snowy, cold November night in 2023. We didn't get a lot of calls that day, so I was just chilling at the shop for my on-call shift. Then all of a sudden I get a WSP, Washington State Patrol, call for a broken down WSP car off this dirt road. I didn't think much of it at the time. It wasn't too weird for me since I have gotten a few calls like it before, so I hop in my flatbed and drive up to the call's location. The directions took me a good 30-ish minutes outside of the city to the mountains on I-90. By the time I got off the freeway, it was super foggy and very hard to see, so I took it slow and easy to be safe. I keep driving up the now dirt mountain road, and I keep thinking to myself that this is a really odd road for a WSP to be on since they usually stay on the interstates and state highways. But I just shrug it off since he could have just been out there, helping a sheriff or something more normal. I finally get to the location, and I just stop the truck and sit there for a minute. What the hell, I think to myself. The WSP car was parked out on this mountain road with all its doors open and no lights on, with no officers in sight. It was so foggy I really could only see the car, but it was clear to me that no one was in sight. I very heavily contemplated just turning around and going back. But I eventually decide to hop out and inspect the car and look for the officer. As a tow truck driver I always carried it with me, so I grabbed my AR with my sidearm holstered and got out of the truck, not knowing what the hell I was about to walk into or see. I walked up to the car very cautiously and first checked out the driver's seat. Nothing was missing, all the equipment, including the CAD, was still in its designated place. Then I walked around to the passenger side again. Same thing, nothing was missing nor moved. Then I go to look at the trunk where they usually keep the R and shotguns, etc. I get to the trunk, but this time the R, and only the R, is missing. That's when I noticed that the forest was dead quiet, no wind, no nothing. I have seen a lot of messed up stuff, bodies, entire families gone in one accident, etc. But I was completely unnerved. Something inside me was telling me to get the hell out of there. But before I did anything, I called my dispatcher just to make sure I had the right location and information, and sure enough, everything was correct. At that point I was ready as hell to get out as fast as possible. Right before I turned the truck around, I yelled out for the cop, but nothing but dead silence came back. Something's not right, I said to myself and booked it out of there. The whole drive back I had this sick feeling like I stumbled across something I was absolutely not supposed to see or be there for. I keep thinking about why the cop was all the way out there, why he left the car, why all the doors were wide open, or if it was even a cop in the first place. More or less, why was only the air missing when thousands of dollars worth of equipment was in that car? Once I got back to the shop, I called the police dispatcher that gave us the call. Since I knew her, I was hoping she could give some answers. But no, she said the exact same thing that was said to me. She said that a WSP car was broken down and just needed a tow. I never told my supervisor or anyone else out of fear that they wouldn't believe me. I mean, I wouldn't if I were them. I never hear anything about a missing cop after nothing on the news, just nothing. It still creeps me out to this day thinking about it. Some years ago, I was driving with a friend in the passenger seat. We were in heavy traffic, and the lane we were on was stationary. I wanted to change lanes since the one to my right was moving better. As I enter, keep in mind that my car was already halfway in the other lane. A car comes up at high speed and cuts me off. It didn't deviate an inch and kept a straight line in its lane. I literally saw it pass through the front of my car. I had just seen two solid objects pass through each other, and my brain took a moment to analyze what it had just seen. There was silence in the car, and after 10 seconds or so, I said out loud, "What the duck just happened?" And my friend, eyes wide open, I will never forget his face and tone, immediately replied, yes, I saw that." I asked him if he saw the other car as I did, passing through ours, and his only answer was, yes, I don't know what just happened. The car passed through the front of the car and part of my friend's legs. It wasn't driving that fast, but considering we were stationary, the collision could have been quite violent. We remained silent for the rest of the ride, trying to process what we had just seen. To this day I have no doubt it did happen and that what we have witnessed was not a misinterpretation. We never talked about it again, and I have no idea what caused this. Paranormal encounter? I know this story is going to sound crazy, but I was driving towards Upper Labarg a few days ago around 1 a.m. with two friends. The driver and I, passenger seat, saw an 8 to 10 foot all black and skinny 2D creature at the side of the road that then quickly ran across the road before disappearing. Before we saw it, we had an eerie feeling out of nowhere that something was not right. Do you have any ideas about what it could have been, based on folklore or urban legends? The closest thing we can find online is a black stick man. Maybe it was just an optical illusion, but I'd love to know what people think. Ghost in the road. Back in 1986 I was 15 years old and was taking guitar lessons at a local music store. My lesson finished somewhere between 9 and 9:30 p.m. The sun had set, and it was dark outside. My dad picked me up from my lesson, and we started the drive home. He is driving, and I am in the front passenger seat. We weren't talking at all because I was tired, kind of slouched down but still looking forward out the window. We are about halfway home, driving at 35 to 40 miles per hour in the far right lane of a 4-lane road. There are 2 lanes going in each direction, with a small median between them. There are houses lining both sides of the street, and maybe there is a street light every block or so. On this particular stretch of road, there are no stoplights or stop signs. There are also no cars visible in front of or behind us while things unfold. The road has a slight incline. We get to the highest point and start a gentle decline, still going 35 to 40 miles per hour. The road is straight and, while pretty dark, we can see it partially illuminated by streetlights at various intervals up to maybe a mile ahead. Up quite far in the distance, maybe a half mile, I see someone in the road. They are on the far right side, moving very slowly to the left, at a cross street where a streetlight is illuminating the road. I don't think anything of it. Just someone crossing the street, albeit very slowly. We continue moving forward without speaking to each other. My dad starts to coast and slow down because we are getting closer to this person, and they are now basically in the middle of our lane. We get closer, maybe 100 yards away, and my dad starts to get on the brakes so that we are able to stop or go around this person. Now we get to maybe 20 yards away, and this person, clearly now a woman, stops, looks right at me, and instantly disappears into thin air. Just bam, gone. I am instantly very alert, sitting straight up, and freaking out. We continue slowly through where she just was, looking around, looking behind us, etc., and there is no one anywhere. My dad says, "Holy, did you see that?" I said, "Yeah, a lady?" To which he replies, "Yeah, in a dress." To which I reply, "With a big hat." To which he then replies, "Yeah, and a big handbag over her arm." We were both pretty freaked out. When we got home, my dad told my mom about the sighting, but she didn't seem too convinced. It was a classic ghost sighting. In total we saw her for 30 seconds. In hindsight she had a very yellowish white glow to her, and if I had to guess, based on her clothes and fashion, she was from the 1800s to maybe the early 1900s. I've read about the different types of ghosts and hauntings but had a thought, what if she wasn't a ghost at all? Maybe she was just a lady out for a walk on what was in her time a nice, old, wooded country path. Then out of nowhere she sees, and maybe also hears, some big machine with two bright lights coming right at her that then just blinks out of existence. If so, I'm sure that scared her more than she scared us. One other thing, we talked about this event for a year or so afterwards, but it eventually drifted out of our day-to-day consciousness. It was several years later I asked my dad about it again and decided to do an experiment to see if we still recalled the same thing. I gave my dad a piece of 8.5 by 11 copy paper, gridded it out into 4 sections, and asked him to draw what he remembers into 4 distinct parts. I did the same, and then we exchanged papers. We both drew the exact same thing. I'm looking at my dad's picture, marveling at how much it is exactly like my picture and recollection, and he says to me, "Do you notice anything about our pictures that we never talked about?" I compare both and can't see anything of note. He says, "Neither of us drew feet on her." And then I think about it, and while her dress was very long, in hindsight, it didn't seem like it would have been long enough to cover her feet. She just seemed to float above the road. Hopefully all truths will be known in time. I was parked in a Walmart lot in a suburb of Minneapolis in a heavy snowstorm. Was woken up by someone knocking on the passenger door. Girl standing there dressed in black with a black cloak for a coat. She asked if I was her ride. I told her no, I was not interested. She gave me a really funny look and said I'm supposed to take somebody home. Well, honey, it's not me. I put the window up and went back in the bunk, but I kept my eye on her as she walked away. She just kind of faded into the blowing snow. I looked at my dog, who is normally excited to see a new person. She never woke up. The next morning when we went for her morning walk, there were no tracks in the snow anywhere near my truck. When I described this to a friend, she told me I had met a reaper, and if I had invited her in out of the cold, she would have taken my soul and left me for dead. The other weird thing was the snow never stuck to her black cloak or skirt. Even as she walked away, the snow swirled around her till she vanished. I work as a long-haul driver between Vancouver and Kamloops, mostly night shifts. I'm used to empty roads and the occasional deer crossing, but there's a stretch near Merritt that always makes me uneasy. One winter night, driving through a dead signal zone, I saw faint red lights up ahead, like hazard lights from another truck pulled over. I slowed down just in case, but as I got closer, the lights suddenly went out. I figured the driver must have left, though I never saw another vehicle. I passed the spot, and right as the GPS signal dropped to 0, I felt a light bump on the back of the trailer, like someone had touched it. I stopped, got out with my flashlight, and checked everything. No animals, no branches, no damage. Nothing. When I climbed back into the cab and checked my mirrors before pulling out, I saw a figure standing still behind the trailer. It didn't move, it just stood there. I turned on my high beams, gone. Completely empty road. Ever since that night, every time I drive that stretch, my truck's distance sensors randomly beep, like something's passing behind me. Nobody believes me, but I swear there's something on that curve that doesn't like being alone. Nebraska. When I was 10-ish, I was passing through on a road trip late at night. I was looking out the window, watching the fields pass by, when I noticed something in the ditch alongside the road. We were going about 45 on a dirt road, so I'm not sure what could have been keeping up with us, but it did. I couldn't see it very well, but it was big, hairy, and somewhat canid-shaped. In hindsight, it might have been a bear, but they don't usually live in that area. Not enough to live off of. An old coworker of mine told me she saw a giant owl once. Like, a 6-foot tall owl. She claimed to have seen it flying alongside her vehicle one night. She saw it again about a week later, standing in one particular spot on the road. The weird thing is, about a month after the road sighting, she ended up being hit by a car in the same spot it had been standing. It nearly unalived her, and she still has visible scars from the collision. She's still very afraid of owls, and it took a lot for her to tell me that story. She seemed a little shaken by the time she was done, and she never mentioned it again after that. I've heard a couple of stories about skinwalkers and wendigos, but mostly from people visiting up north. South Dakota, Minnesota, and the like. Those kinds of things don't usually come down to this area, from what I've seen. There are ghosts. Plenty of them. Enough that there isn't really much point in talking about it. People die all the time, and sometimes they just can't let go. Native people who were displaced, settlers who died too soon, and old-timers who couldn't leave their farms, etc. Someone told me about a Bigfoot sighting once, but I think it was just one of the homeless fellows that live in the area. Or a meth head. The area in question is plagued with addiction. We have some eagles around, and that's led a few people to claim sighting a giant raptor of some kind. Years back, I could have sworn I read a news article about a man's corgi being snapped up out of his backyard by some kind of large bird. It was played up for intrigue, but I'm sure it was just an eagle. You never truly understand how big those things can get until they're right in front of you. There's a place on the outskirts of my hometown called Nickum Cemetery. To get there, you have to drive down a few back roads, then cut through cornfields on a dirt road until you reach a small tree line that surrounds the cemetery. There's also this old house right next to it, and the rumor has always been that the owner will chase you off with a shotgun if he catches you there. I never experienced that part, thankfully. The road forms a circle, there's only one way in and one way out, and when I was a teenager, everyone said it was haunted. Naturally, that made it the perfect late-night adventure spot. When I first heard about Nickum Cemetery as a freshman in high school, I really wanted to go. One of my older friends had a car, so we spent a whole day trying to find it. We drove through creepy, empty roads with abandoned houses and sketchy properties that looked like meth labs but never found it. Eventually, someone gave us the exact coordinates, and after a lot of begging, my dad finally agreed to let us go, but only if he came too, because he thought it was unsafe for a couple of teenagers to be out there alone. So one night, my dad, his girlfriend, my friend, and I went in 2 separate cars. We finally found the place using the coordinates, parked inside, and got out to look around. It was dark, not sure how late, but late enough to be unsettling. I took a bunch of pictures, we ran around a bit, and then got back in the car to leave. While driving away, I started scrolling through the photos on my phone, and my heart dropped. In one of the pictures, you can clearly see a figure running in the direction the photo was taken from. If you zoom in, there are 2 faces. We all freaked out, and to this day, that picture still gives me chills. Fast forward a few years. Another friend and I decided to go back just for fun, small town Midwest boredom at its finest. We both remembered the directions, so we headed out late one night. We turned onto the first dirt road that leads toward the cornfields and started driving. The road felt longer than we remembered, and we started slowing down, thinking maybe we missed the turn. Out of nowhere, her car completely lost power. The engine shut off, the wheel locked, everything. She'd never had issues with it before. We both kind of froze. It was about 11 p.m., pitch black, no cell service, and we were just 2 girls stranded in the middle of nowhere. After a few minutes of panicking and trying to figure out what to do, her car suddenly just turned back on by itself. Like nothing ever happened. We laughed nervously, turned around, and got back to the main road. But neither of us could shake how weird it was, so we decided to give it one more try, this time using coordinates a friend texted us. We followed the exact same route as before, and when we reached the spot where the car had died earlier, we realized something that gave us both instant chills. About 15 feet ahead was the hidden dirt road that led straight to the cemetery. It had been there the whole time. Her car had died right next to it. Between that night and the photo from years before, Nickum Cemetery still gives me an uneasy feeling, and that's just the start of the strange things that started happening when the 2 of us hung out after that night. Driving home one night. This happened a while back, and I kind of forgot about it until last night, when a similar thing happened that reminded me about it. One night, I was driving home from volunteering at a church function, and I was in the car alone. I was not notably fatigued, there were no drugs or alcohol in my system, only lemonade and hot dogs. I was on a main highway, not traveling particularly fast, but was approaching a red light, so I started to slow down, and as any driver does, I just happened to look over at the vehicle that was pulling up beside me on the driver's side. It was a late model, large, black SUV like a Chevy Suburban. It didn't have tinted windows, so I could see the driver and passenger. As I looked over, I noticed the passenger, a woman in her late 60s with gray hair wearing a black top, who had a face reminiscent of someone who has died in real life. Her face had sunken eyes, and her eyes were looking up like there was no life in her, and her mouth was open, her cheeks were drawn in, and her face was pale, and she was just sitting still. I have personally seen dead people before, so I instantly knew she was dead. I instantly said what the F and looked over at the driver. He was just sitting there waiting for the light to turn green. That light seemed like it took forever as I stared as she sat there motionless. I start to think maybe he knows she passed and is just driving to the hospital or something, as if you continue down that highway and change to another boulevard, there is a hospital there. I am thinking this must have been 40 seconds or less, but I felt like it was incredibly long. Now here is where it just gets freaky, that almost made me blow a red light. Her face sort of, for lack of a better word, morphs into her talking on a cell phone, and then she turns to look at me. I can't explain what I saw as we were approaching the red light and then stopped until I drove speeding away. Like I said, no alcohol, drugs, or sleep deprivation was involved, only a lonely highway lit by an intersection light and our two vehicles. If you have any suggestions on what I saw, I would like to hear about it. I grew up in Thornton, and we used to drive this road all the time at night when we had nothing to do. I had a fast car, and it was a fun road to cruise, plus it was dark, and there were no cops ever back then. One night we were driving down the road and saw a girl in a white dress walking on the side of the road. Keep in mind this was like 1 a.m. There were 4 of us in the car, and we all saw the same thing. Concerned, we stopped, and when we did a U-turn, she was gone. That was enough for me, and we hightailed it out of there. I always heard stories growing up but never paid much attention. But I will never forget that night and what I saw. I am American Indian/Native American and grew up on a reservation in the upper Midwest. Our home was 35 miles from the nearest large grocery store. Winter can cause treacherous driving conditions, as roads can become snow-packed and slippery quickly due to the rural area. One winter when I was in my early teens, my mother and I drove to the grocery store during a snowstorm to shop for food and other items. The snowstorm had dumped a lot of snow overnight, so we made our purchases and immediately left for home. We left early and were returning in the early afternoon. The 35-minute drive would normally take about 45 minutes, but the road was snow-packed and no other cars were on the road. The wind was drifting the snow over the road, leaving a white plain where the road would have been. My mother drove well below the speed limit in order to drive through drifting snow and not skid off the road. We were at the midpoint of the drive and just passed my uncle's house. We didn't stop, as my mother didn't want to get stuck overnight due to the deteriorating road conditions, so we pressed on. Just past my uncle's house, the road goes over a hill with a long, gentle descent on the other side. The snow was falling lightly, and the wind had died down, but the road was covered. Only a long white path lay ahead of us. No tire marks were on either lane, as there was no other car on the road. As we began to descend the hill, my mother noticed something on the road, so she began to slow the car to a crawl. At first I thought it was a log or piece of wood lying across the road. As we came closer, my mother and I noticed it was a man lying across the road. He was wearing a short-sleeved white t-shirt and jeans with black boots. He was lying face up with his arms spread out from his sides and legs together. His eyes were closed as he was just lying on the snow. My mother gradually brought the car to a stop, and we stared at the man. Slowly she backed the car up and managed to turn around. She said she wanted to go get my uncle for help. Slowly we made our way back over the hill, and my mother pulled into my uncle's driveway. She got out and went to the house. Soon my mother appeared with my uncle, who was carrying a blanket and other items. He got in, and we turned around and started over the hill. No other car had passed us, and the light was good as it was still early. My uncle was concerned, wondering if the man was hitchhiking and had been overcome by hypothermia. As we drove over the hill, my uncle was leaning far forward near the windshield trying to see the man. As we approached where we stopped, we could see the man was no longer lying across the road. There was nothing. The snow beyond our tracks was untouched. We could see our tire tracks where we stopped and where my mother turned around, but beyond the snow on the road was untouched. No car tracks. No animal tracks. No footprints. My uncle got out of the car, saying maybe the man rolled into the ditch or walked after us. He began to search the road and both ditches but found nothing. He returned to the car and told my mom to continue into town as he watched the ditches. Slowly we drove into town but never saw any cars on the road or any marks on the sides of the road. The man just disappeared. My uncle told my mom to go to the police so he could report it and then maybe get a ride back to his place with one of the patrolmen. My mother and I both reported the incident, and we returned home. I have no explanation for what my mother and I saw. Has anyone seen this highway ghost? I was in New Mexico a year ago in the summer with my partner. The encounter happened on the 1-25. I saw a man who was wearing all black, around 5 feet 6 inches with long dark hair with silver streaks. He wore a black cowboy hat and was indigenous. He was walking by our car around a foot away. As soon as the car we were in passed him and I looked back, he was gone. I'm used to seeing ghosts, so that didn't faze me one bit. It seems like that part of the highway was his part, if you catch my drift. A few months later, my partner's mother called us to say that a family friend saw the same man on the same part of the I-25. They saw an indigenous man in all black, with black and gray streaked hair, around 5 feet 6 inches, and wearing a black cowboy hat. He was also very close to their car. As soon as they drove by him, he vanished into thin air. Has anyone else seen him? I'm just curious to know who this ghost is. My encounter on what is dubbed the scariest road in Massachusetts. Many years ago, when I was in my 20s, I encountered this ghostly hitchhiker. This was years, at least 10, before I even heard of this phantom. I used to like going for late night rides alone to unwind. It was like a relaxing ritual for me before bed. I wandered many miles away from where I lived and found myself on Route 44 in Taunton and drove all the way into Rehoboth. Soon after entering Rehoboth, I decided to turn around and head east back toward Taunton. As I was driving a certain stretch where nothing was around and it was particularly dark, I suddenly noticed this man on the side of the road that seemed to appear from nowhere. He looked rough and disheveled, with bushy red hair, a beard, and dark, gaunt eyes. He wore a red plaid shirt and dungarees. The second I passed him, my eyes shot to my rearview mirror. I was startled to see no one there. I had literally just driven by him, and there was not enough time for him to hide. It startled me enough that I stopped my car, did a 3-point turn, and drove back to the spot I saw him. I turned my car to be on his side of the road, parked at that spot, and got out to look around the incline. There was no one there either, and I could not hear any indication of life or movement. I gave up trying to figure this oddity out. I got up and went home and filed this incident away in my mental storage space. About a decade later, I was watching a documentary online, and suddenly this road was featured with descriptions of this ghost from eyewitnesses who were describing exactly what I saw. Some eyewitnesses had menacing experiences with him, while I was simply surprised at how quickly he vanished and didn't realize I should have had paranormal concerns. This was my first and only encounter with the paranormal. Growing up, I used to watch a lot of horror movies, which made me curious about paranormal activities. However, since I had never experienced anything paranormal myself, I remained skeptical, until the day I encountered something I still can't explain. Even though I didn't see anything in particular, what I heard that day has stayed ingrained in my memory, and I often find myself thinking about that event. That's why I've decided to share it with you. This goes back to September or October of 2021. At the time, I had a close circle of friends. We often went on joyrides together, and I was usually the one driving. One night in August that year, 2 of my friends and I decided to visit a nearby village where I used to spend a lot of time as a kid. I was familiar with the area, particularly the popular gathering places, but on this occasion, our sole intention was to unwind. I drove us to a place we called the Fields. The name is pretty self-explanatory. It was an area surrounded by fields of grain or crops, depending on the season. There was an asphalt road leading into the village, which connected to a dirt road, essentially the entrance to the fields. About 230 meters down that road, there was an intersection, and around 70 meters past it was where we'd usually park. It was a quiet, rural area where the stars were visible, so we went outside, stargazed, talked, and had a great time before heading home. Fast forward to September or October of that year. My 2 friends and I decided to go there again, and this time, my friend's girlfriend joined us while we brought a pack of weed. The full moon night was chilly but windless, with the crops in the fields reaching my chest. I'm 176 centimeters, 5 feet 9 inches for reference. We hung out for a while, just like before. At some point, my friend went into the car to roll a joint. Everyone except the girlfriend smoked, but since she was nervous about anyone smoking and driving, I reassured her that I'd sit this one out. My friends decided to hotbox the car, and because it was chilly, around 11 p.m., the girlfriend stayed inside with them. So, There were two of my friends in the front seats, the girl in the back, and I was the only one outside. As they sat in the car doing their thing, I stood outside watching the moonlit fields. I could faintly hear cars passing over potholes on the distant main road and, occasionally, dogs barking back in the village. I thought to myself that I probably wouldn't see as many shooting stars as last time, but I was still glad to be there in that moment. About 3 or 4 minutes later, I suddenly heard a faint sound, a woman's voice, moaning. It was coming from the direction I was facing, out in the fields. My first thought was, is someone actually doing it in the fields? I took a step or two toward the sound, looking around quietly. As I got closer, the moaning grew louder and gradually turned into crying, then into full-on sobbing. At one point, it became so loud and so horrifying that I couldn't believe I wasn't seeing anyone. It sounded like a woman, no more than 2 meters, 6.6 feet, in front of me, being skinned alive, but there was nothing there. There was no movement in the crops, no shapes, and no sounds except the voice. That's when I realized something was seriously wrong. Still trying to process it, I backed away toward the car, opened the rear door, and asked the girlfriend to come out and see if she could hear what I was hearing. She stepped out, took a few steps toward the fields, and immediately yelled, "Get in the car." I didn't think twice. I ran to the driver's side, opened the door, and saw my 2 friends still baked and completely unaware of what was happening. The girlfriend jumped back into the rear seat, and both of us were shouting for my friend to move so I could drive. In the chaos of switching seats and turning the car around, it honestly felt like something straight out of a horror movie. As we sped away, I took one last look at the fields. I couldn't see anything, and I honestly don't even remember if I could still hear the voice at that point. I just wanted to get out of there. I glanced toward the intersection I mentioned earlier, but again, saw no one. My 2 friends laughed it off and made a few jokes about me running away, and they quickly forgot about it. But the girlfriend and I both heard the same thing, and neither of us could explain it. The night ended with us returning to the city and, ironically, buying more weed. In retrospect, the girlfriend had brought a few scented incense sticks along with some snacks. She lit 3 of them and stuck them into the ground near where we parked. Furthermore, not far from that spot, there's a cemetery where my grandparents and some relatives are buried. Maybe it's just my imagination, but I wouldn't be surprised if we accidentally conjured something that night. Strange creature sighting in Green Bay. About an hour ago I was driving south down Nicollet Drive, and just as I was approaching Communiversity Park, I noticed a strange white or light gray looking figure standing next to the school crossing sign near the University of Wisconsin Green Bay main entrance on the right side of the road. It stood there for about 20 to 30 seconds before walking into the woods. I honestly wasn't sure if it was anything until it moved, which it did before I got close enough to tell what it was. I slowed down as I passed the spot where it had disappeared into the trees, but I saw nothing. That is a pretty small patch of woods between the road and the bay, so I am not sure where it could have gone. It was almost as tall as the sign and looked like it was walking on 2 legs. Basically the best comparison would be that it looked like a Yeti, but Green Bay is the last place I would expect to see something like that, especially so close to the city. Does anyone have any ideas or see something similar? I know it sounds crazy, but I definitely saw something. One night, I spotted a Wendigo on Highway 80 in Utah. We made eye contact. It was standing behind a yellow arrow sign with its hands around it. It turned its head and watched me as I drove by. I know it wasn't a deer, as the sign is much too tall for a deer to have its head level with the top. It wasn't a tree or a bush by the sign either. I've driven by that exact sign many times during the day, and nothing is around it that could look weird. The Haunted Road of Connecticut. I'm the type of person who gets scared just talking about scary things. Even saying the name out loud gives me chills. Like most people from Trumbull, Connecticut, I avoid speaking about Velvet Street altogether. Not because I don't believe in the stories, but because deep down, I do. And the scariest part is we all seem to experience the same things. Velvet Street, or as some call it, Dracula Drive, has been around forever. It's not just a creepy, narrow road buried deep in the woods. It's a place soaked in fear, whispers, and stories no one can fully explain. The legends are always the same: the Melonheads and the Lady in White. The Melonheads are said to be small, deformed, humanoid creatures with oversized bald heads and glowing eyes. The kind of thing you'd laugh off, until you see glowing eyes in the trees or hear giggling when no one's there. They're rumored to live in the dense woods along Velvet Street, only coming out at night. One of the most well-known stories tells of a group of teenagers whose car was hijacked by these creatures. The Melonheads supposedly drove it down the road, swerving and cackling the entire way, like they were mocking the fear they caused. I always thought that story, and honestly, all of it, was total garbage. I was born and raised in Trumbull. I grew up hearing this stuff. It sounded like something bored kids made up to scare each other. But the lady in white? Yeah. I used to think she was fake, too. Until I started seeing her. My first encounter was when I was 5 years old. Just a glimpse, a flash of white in the woods while riding in the backseat of my mom's car. I thought it was my imagination. I wanted it to be. But as I got older, I'd keep seeing her. Always on or near Velvet Street. Always at night. Always barefoot, in the same dirty white dress. Never running. Never chasing. Just watching. And the weird part? I'm not alone. People around here don't like to talk about her, but when they do, it's always the same woman. Same long black hair. Same pale face. Same feeling of dread, like something is seriously wrong the second you lay eyes on her. Velvet Street has a reputation for a reason. It's not just the legends. It's not just the stories passed down. It's the fact that, for some reason, once you've been down that road, a part of it never lets go of you. So yeah, laugh at the melonheads. Doubt the lady in white. But drive down Velvet Street at night. And you might just stop laughing. Here I go. I never believed in haunted roads. Ghosts? Demons? The lady in white? I always thought that was just hometown folklore. Stories to scare kids. Until one night, Velvet Street made me believe everything. And worse, it made me believe she's not just watching. She's pretending to be one of us. I was 17, and my boyfriend had just turned 18. It was late, too late to be out on a road like that. But we were bored, curious, and maybe a little reckless, the kind of night where you think nothing bad can happen to you. We turned onto Velvet Street with the windows cracked just enough to feel the cold, still air. The road was barely even a road, more like a trail. Unpaved. Narrow. Cliffs on one side, thick woods on the other. Once you're on Velvet, there's no turning around, literally. It's too narrow. Reversing would be suicidal with how tight the turns are. The only way out is forward. We'd only been on the road for a few minutes when we saw headlights ahead. Another car? We slowed to a crawl. The other car did too. It was an old white sedan, moving too smoothly for the potholes it should have been bumping through. As it passed us, we got a good look inside. 2 hands on the wheel. Long, pale fingers. And a woman with pitch black hair and a white dress, staring straight ahead. No expression. No blink. Like a mannequin. I felt it before I saw it, something wrong. My chest went cold. Her eyes didn't shift to look at us. Her head didn't move. It was like she wasn't driving the car, just placed inside it like a prop. That looked like, I started. Don't say it, my boyfriend cut me off. His hands tightened on the wheel. We kept going, hearts racing. It didn't make sense. There are no intersections, no exits, no loops. Velvet Street is a one-way shot through the woods. And then, 5 minutes later, we saw her again. The same car. Same headlights. Same woman. Driving toward us from the front. My stomach dropped. It wasn't someone else. It wasn't a coincidence. It was her. Again. Same white dress. Same dead face. And this time, she looked at us. Her eyes met mine. They were pure black. Not like dark eyes, black, like ink, like holes. And this time, she smiled. But it wasn't human. Her lips stretched wide, too wide, like her face was tearing open to reveal something beneath. Something not meant for this world. My boyfriend floored it. We tore down the road, skidding on gravel, slamming into potholes, and scraping the edge of the cliff. We just needed to get out. Every turn felt the same. Trees closed in tighter. The road felt longer. Too long. We should have been out by now, he muttered. We passed that same busted tree 3 times. The same branch hanging low. The same tire mark in the dirt. It was like the road was looping us. Like she was playing with us. Then the radio came on. We didn't touch it. The car doesn't even have Bluetooth. And a woman's voice came through. Soft. Slow. Glitchy. Turn around. Turn around. Turn around. But we couldn't. We hit a sharp bend too fast. The car almost slid off the cliff's edge. My boyfriend stopped the car completely, hands shaking. We were frozen. Then we saw headlights again. From behind this time. She was behind us now. But we had never heard another car turn around. There's no room for that. No noise. No engine. Just Her. And she was catching up. We didn't speak. Didn't blink. He just hit the gas, and we didn't stop until the road opened up again, until the dirt turned back into pavement and the world felt real again. We pulled over half a mile away and just sat there, not saying anything. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. He didn't blink for 5 minutes straight. We never went back. And we never will. Because whatever we saw, it wasn't a ghost. It wasn't a person. It was something pretending to be human. And it wanted us to keep driving. My friends and I would often traverse the pine forest late at night in our 4x4 vehicles. Before maps, we would just go down all the fire roads and pull off on any random county road. It was completely dark, with no moonlight to guide us. We were driving down a narrow path in a small Suzuki Samurai, but the larger forest trucks could barely fit and easily plowed through the dense growth. Pure sugar sand. The next thing we see is a tan, mid-90s Buick LeSabre. The only way this car would make it would be if it were towed. We stopped, walked around the car, and my friend peeked in with a flashlight, and this dude jumped up and slammed into the side of the window, yelling. We run to the truck, and this person gets out and starts chasing us. We pulled away as fast as we could but kept slipping. This person was pretty damn close before we were able to get traction at a stable speed. We talked to some people about the story, and they were just casually like, yeah, the meth head in the Buick, he's always out there. Do not drive down Stanford Road in Boston Mills. There was a house at the top of the hill, and I remember driving there with this girl I liked one night. The road is fine for about 2,000 feet. It's windy and narrow but still fine. Then it turns into an almost ancient asphalt one-lane road that forces you to slow to a crawl. We reached a point where the road just stopped. Rocks and a makeshift metal gate are in the way. We had to turn around, and as I began my 3-point turn, my headlights spun and illuminated the property line, which was marked by tree branches stabbed into the ground with severed deer heads skewered on top of them. As she screamed out, "What the hell was that?" I kicked it back in reverse as fast as I could. Whipping it back into the drive and pulling out, I remember seeing a figure with a twisted face and a terrifying grimace staring at us from the porch of the house. Its eyes were huge and intensely yellow even after my headlights flashed past it. I don't know if what I saw was real. She didn't get a look at it. I've never been back since. I don't know the story of that house or who might have lived there. The place isn't on maps, so it could have been demolished, but whoever or whatever lived there did not want to be bothered. It bothers us still to this day. A drive home that changed me. This is the strangest thing to happen to me yet. October 2018, I was driving home from teaching music lessons one night in Atlanta, around 9:45 on the highway. Suddenly this memory comes to me. Before my family moved to Atlanta, I lived in Kennesaw, Georgia. It's really not too far from the city, but far enough to feel suburban. My neighborhood there was really just in the middle of a giant forest, miles between us and the nearest residential development. I was raised by a single mother. Her work schedule was harsh, so she had arranged since kindergarten a babysitting gig with my neighbor, whose son Mike was the same age as me. We basically grew up as brothers, me arriving at his house around 7 a.m., going to school together, and hanging after school every day until 7 p.m. In the summer, with no school, we had eons together. His mom was pretty lax and would let us go do whatever for the whole day. We often spent our days exploring the outer woods of our neighborhood, choosing this direction or that, going as far as we could before we knew it was time to come back. The land was wild, with woods and creeks and little waterfalls. Copperheads and water moccasins are our biggest fear. We'd come home for Capri Sun refills covered in mud, and Mike's mom would hose us down. So as I'm driving last October, I'm thinking of this house I just taught a lesson at. An upper-class family. They had decked their house out with Halloween decorations. I was thinking about how strange it is that we do that and thinking about why humans are so connected to the idea of the dead. On the highway, really in an instant, this memory just pops back, almost like watching a movie. Mike and I are 8, second grade, way back in the woods. The land had gotten weird, almost marshy. I remember packs of moss floating on slow-moving water. No trails back there, we just walked. We'd found what we thought to be some kind of island in the marsh. Solid land when the rest was muddy and sometimes like a pond. We were sitting on the bank of this island. Used to play games where leaves were planets, and we'd tear holes in them and pretend they were asteroid impacts or bombs gone off. So we're chilling there doing that kind of shit when all of a sudden, out of the straight brush, this man pops out. The best way I can describe him is Abraham Lincoln style. He's wearing a tux-like getup, black and white, but the coattail is divided into two skinny tube shapes that drift down to the backs of his knees. He wears a top hat like Abe, not super huge, but big enough to give a kind of silly feel. Odd for us to see, at least. He is smiling, and his presence is super gentle. He walks straight over to us. The way he came was a dry stretch, not from the wetter side of our little island. I remember seeing him purposefully step around mud spots. He stopped right in front of us, just looking down. We were sitting, like in the posture of sitting on a curb, and he said, "Don't mind me, boys, just passing along." Then he briskly walked off and back into the woods. I recall us being scared, but not seriously. Kind of like, what was he doing here? What was he wearing? That was weird? We didn't take off running or anything. So this vivid memory pops back into my head on the highway. I'm like, what the hell? No way. And I call my GF and tell her exactly what I recalled. She responds kinda like I'm telling a dream, like, oh, weird, crazy. But I'm like, yo, I have to reach out to Mike about this and see if he remembers it. We'd lost touch hard, staying close for a while after I moved into Midtown ATL, but eventually fading away. He has a daughter now. This was 20 years ago. I get home around 10:15 or so. I'm watching some videos on my bed with my cat and browsing and just doing general end of the night phone stuff. I open Insta. I've got a few accounts, one for a band, one for memes, one for work, and one personal. When I switch to my personal account, I've got a DM. It's from Mike. This man had DM'd me at 9:49 p.m. "Hey bro, do you remember when we were way back in the swamp and that man in the top hat came up to us?" I got chills. I was like, "Aight, what's going on?" The crazy thing is that it's been a dramatic year in terms of my perception of the world. I was a hardcore argumentative atheist since my teens, but over the last year and a half I have just been opening my mind and realizing I have no clue what is going on just in general. Michael and I talked for over an hour, in detail, about everything we could remember. He had been lying in bed when it came to him, at the same time as I was driving. We remembered everything the same. He reminded me of exactly the way we'd come, from this boy Nick's house. It wasn't a malicious thing for me. It was just a reminder that I'm just so unsure of what this world is all about. Saw something crawling in the streets. This experience happened 2 years ago. In mid-2018. So, I used to, almost every weekend, on Saturdays, go to one of my friends' houses or have them in mine. We alternate the houses a lot, just to hang out, play games, and drink. We are a big group, every meeting gets about 10 to 15 people, and these meetings used to last until 3 or 4 a.m. on Sunday. I do not do this anymore, because I have been working in another city since 2019. Following one of these gatherings at a friend's residence, we spent the day engaged in various games. I left the place around 2 to 3 a.m. I do not remember the exact time. It's pretty far from my home, so I have to drive for around 30 minutes to get near where I used to live. On the way home, there is this main street. I have to take a sharp turn to the right to go home. On the right side of this main street is some military forest area, with walls and barbed wire and that kind of thing. The turn that I need to take is just at the end of this walled area. The main street continues, while I take a turn to the right. So, while I was doing the turn to the right, I did a glance to the left with the corner of my eye. And I saw something crawling in the middle of this main street. I'm getting goosebumps while writing this. It had 4 members, like a person but could not be a person. The angle of the articulations was totally not human. It reminded me of a cricket leg. I don't know. I didn't stop the car, I did the turn a bit slowly, looking at it while it was moving. That member was moving in a weird way, a bit slow, and like it was learning to walk. I do not know how to explain. It was not naked, it had some rags. It looked like old torn fabric covering the body. It was about 50 to 60 meters away from me. I had a very strange feeling. To this day, I have never experienced this type of feeling more than once in my life. Just that day. It was very bad. It was like I was going to die. It stopped moving, like it saw me. I can't tell if it saw me, I could not see the face. It had a head, not an animal head, with a snout. It was a rounded head. Like a human or monkey. And I am talking about seconds. The visual contact lasted for, like, 5, 6 seconds? I don't know. I did not stop. After the turn I accelerated the car. I was in shock and almost crying, which made the situation feel surreal. I looked back a few times until I got home. I stopped the car to open the gate. Almost in panic, looking back all the time, almost dropped the keys. It was late. Empty streets all the way. Not a single person. I parked the car, entered my home, rushed up the stairs to my bedroom, and sat on the bed for a while. That image lingered in my mind, making it difficult to fall asleep. I still can remember it, I still can see it in my mind. I didn't share that experience with anyone, this is the first time I am sharing it. Thank you for listening. What did I see on the side of the road? This story is long and admittedly kind of unbelievable, so bear with me. I've had a lot of weird things happen throughout my life. I always chalked it up to being naturally in the wrong place at the wrong time and having bad luck with paranormal stuff. But I also have a kind of thrill-seeking attitude, so that's where this story starts. I know this is going to sound like I'm making it up, or like I'm crazy, but I need to know what the hell I saw. I'm sure some of you have heard of Stull, Kansas. If not, it is believed to be one of the gateways to hell and the birthplace of Satan's son, along with other claims such as the presence of cultists or Satan worshippers in the town. This town was only about a 3.5-hour drive from where I lived at the time, and I had been wanting to visit for a while, so one night I got a wild thought and decided to just go with my now ex. We had both done some research and heard about how people in the area can be violent, so we each had a pocket knife on us as well as a sword in the back seat. Seems over the top, but people have been shot at in the area. While driving up there, things felt strange. I experienced what seemed like a vision. The roads appeared to vanish as we approached the town, and other vehicles seemed to be trying to force us off the road. The closer we got to the town, after 2 toll stations and stopping for gas to be certain we didn't run out, the creepier it felt. The road would just completely drop off in front of us, and all we could see were the grassy hills around and trees. I was the one driving, because my ex doesn't drive. There were a few times where other vehicles would get right up behind us, to the point I couldn't see because of the headlights bouncing off the mirrors. The initial attempt to halt was entirely unsuccessful, as we completely overlooked the town, since the only visible features from this roadway were a church, a single small house, and a graveyard. It wasn't until we passed it that I realized that was Stull, and I almost couldn't turn around at an intersection because the truck behind us wouldn't slow down or go around us when I began to brake. We got turned around eventually and got to the cemetery only to realize that the gate was locked with a no trespassing sign posted. So, we decided to leave. An important thing to note is that the roads in this area are super curvy and twist a lot. As we were departing, we both experienced an intuitive sensation, which prompted us to turn back. The time was 11:34 when we turned around, about 4 hours after we had left our house. We took one turn down a dirt road to get back, and I panicked because I swore I saw a kid run out in front of the car. I was driving an old '88 Lincoln, so it was pure steel and would have surely hurt him with the way he seemingly went under. I didn't feel any bumps, and when I screamed asking where he went, my ex was completely confused. She didn't see anyone at all and reassured me that I hadn't just hit a child. Sure as hell, when I pulled forward there wasn't anything in the road behind us, and there definitely wasn't anything caught underneath the car. But that's not even the weirdest part. I had been keeping track of the turns, the curves, and all of the roads because I didn't want to get lost in the unfamiliar hillbilly backwoods area. I knew I had at least 2 more turns before I would be back facing the direction of Stull, especially because this dirt road was straight compared to the curved but consistently southeast road we had been on. I reached the end of that road and was literally right beside the town. So, I go to try to pull up near the cemetery again, but a large truck is behind me and will not slow down at all. The truck almost rammed into me when my accelerator suddenly stopped, leaving me stranded in the middle of the road despite my efforts to push the gas pedal down. I was looking in the side mirror when I caught something, and I looked up to my left. There was what I would have mistaken for a naked person, if it weren't for its arms and hands. This thing was crouched on the shoulder of the road, with its face buried behind its knees like it was trying to hide its face. It was malnourished looking, skinny to the point of appearing to be skin on bone. Its arms were unnatural. From a crouching position, its upper arms were long enough that its forearms rested entirely on the ground beside it. Its hands were abnormally long, with dark nails that looked about like a stiletto press-on nail. Its skin was gray, I could tell that even with the yellow lights from my headlights. My hair stood on end, my heart felt like it stopped for a moment. I couldn't breathe as I looked at this thing. I immediately asked my ex if she saw it, but she had been looking behind us at the pickup truck. The truck went around us when I didn't speed up, and that's when I noticed it wasn't a truck. It was a white van with government tags and stickers, you know the kind, not police stickers, but like county officials. It drove past us, damn near clipping our front bumper when they merged back into our lane. It wasn't until we were back past the town that my accelerator started working again. Thankfully, I was so worried we'd break down more than 3 hours from home with almost dead cell phones. My ex's phone was dead because she had been using maps, and mine was at maybe 25% because maps drained my battery. We ended up getting back on the interstate to head back down towards Wichita when my ex checked the directions to be sure. It was 1:07 a.m. This didn't make sense to either of us, as it hadn't been more than an hour and a half since our last check, and we had only been driving around for a maximum of 40 minutes. It was at this point I explained to my ex what I saw, and she didn't know what it could be. The rest of the trip home is unimportant, but for months after I had nightmares about this thing. To this day, about 3 years later, I still think I see it sometimes, and I still have nightmares. I'll still get glances where I swear I can see it in stark contrast to the dark. Its arms were so freakishly long. I've tried having my arms rest the way this thing's were and just can't. Its upper arms must have been at least 2.5 feet long, depending on how they were positioned. I didn't see its face, which is what my older brother asked when I talked about it, because he claimed to have seen something smaller but similar with red eyes that, when he talked to an ex-priest, was some kind of Native American demon, which I don't believe was what I saw. Its skin was light gray, like dried cement. Based on how it was hunched over while crouching, I didn't see its height but can assume that it was tall. Whatever it was wasn't natural, and it certainly wasn't a person. Does anyone know what I saw? It still messes with me almost 3 years later, and I can't help but feel like it followed me home. I am not sure if the experience was paranormal, but it occurred about 10 years ago. My friend and I were leaving downtown. He had picked me up, so he was dropping me off. I lived right next to Ditmer Park, so our route home would be the back way, which would be down Circle South Road. Remember, it's like 3 or so in the morning, the bars let out at 2. Don't be deaf after that. But as we were passing the Mexican cemetery, there was a girl walking. I couldn't get a view of her face because she was, looking down, and it kind of seemed like her hair was covering most of her face, but she was walking barefoot, and as we rode by, I turned my whole body to get a look, and I asked my homie, bro, did you see that? He said, yay, because as we were coming up to her, neither one of us was really talking. We were just riding, listening to the music. He said yay, and we both wanted to check if she was alright, but we continued driving because we both felt uneasy, not exactly creeped out, just strange. I remember asking him about it about a year or two ago, and he was like, yeah, he remembered it, but he very much said he didn't want to talk about it, so I think it really freaked him out. I still think about it all the time, just not too sure what to make of that situation. Just thought I'd share because it was a paranormal post about circles, and I drive through there very often, and I think about that night every time. Something's walking down the road. This was 5 days after Halloween, so I desperately wanted it to be a costume. I was coming home from work last night, and I could see something on the other side of the street in the distance, jerking forward. When I say jerking, I mean it was walking forward with its head bent down and sort of jostling its shoulders like it was laughing or crying, and walking with a stutter. Is that a thing? At first I thought it was someone in trouble, so I slowed down. It was wearing a dirty white nightgown and was barefoot and grayish pale. It was probably 28 degrees outside. It had this clown red hair that was straight and stringy and long, and from far away it looked greasy, but as I got closer I noticed these scarred-looking pink patches in between clumps of hair on the scalp, almost like burn patches. It did not look up at me, but as I passed it, it stopped walking for a moment, kept jerking, unfortunately, and I got that feeling in the pit of my stomach, and the hair stood up on my arms, and I sped my car up until I could no longer see it. I do not have a photo. I would rather not slow down anymore. It really seems like it could have been well done special effects and someone coming back from a Halloween scare gig, but I was in the middle of nowhere, and it would be odd for someone to walk home in that getup that long after Halloween has been over. It may have been a lost person, but the look, feel, and movements made me think otherwise. I've done a general search, and not much comes up for this specific visual. Thoughts? The man on the side of the road. Last year, my husband and I were babysitting our niece and nephew. Their family lives about an hour and a half from where we live. On this particular visit, their parents were out late. So we didn't actually begin to head home until about 1 or 2 in the morning. The area that we live in is in the southeast of the US, and it is very heavily wooded in most areas. The roads are quite secluded, and houses are usually far apart from one another and can be miles back off of the actual roads themselves. When we left, my husband was driving and I was in the passenger seat. We had been traveling down an empty road for probably about 45 minutes. There were no houses off to the side, just guardrails and woods. It was slightly foggy as well, but not bad enough to impair vision. I'm not sure how to transition into the next part apart from saying that suddenly something weird happened. I was staring straight ahead, also assuming that my husband was as well, since he was driving, and a man just appeared partially in the road, on my side. He wasn't fully in the road, but enough to alarm an unsuspecting driver in the middle of the night. He was a young man, blonde, and he was wearing a white tank top and brownish/orange pants. He had nothing with him. He was just standing there. I recall that the weirdest part of this entire encounter was the way that he was standing and how he was looking at me. He had his back partially turned towards the car as if he was walking but stopped in his tracks. He had turned his head toward the car, and his eyes were intensely locked with mine. I know that sounds unbelievable, especially since we were traveling at about 55 miles per hour with bright headlights on in the middle of the night, making it likely impossible for him to have seen me, let alone locked eyes with me. However, that adds to why the incident freaked me out so much. We passed him as quickly as we came up on him, and he was gone. I looked at my husband and laughed and said, "That was ducking weird." And I shit you not, he just says, "What are you talking about?" After asking him several more times, it was determined that he didn't see this person. From my perspective, it's impossible that he didn't see him. This person was almost in the road and was a striking contrast to the surrounding scenery due to the bright clothes he was wearing and how the headlights really displayed that. I didn't consider this to be linked to a paranormal occurrence until I realized I was the only witness and reflected more on how the entire scenario made me feel strange. This person appeared to be looking directly at me. I actually don't know what to think. I should be grateful that this was my only paranormal experience, as it could have been worse. Thanks for listening. Weird creature my fiancé and I saw on the road. I live in a Rust Belt state about an hour south of our state capital in a rural hilly area. My fiancé and I were driving from my parents' house to a friend's for a bit of night swimming. Our way there passes a state park's boundaries, and about 5 miles from any house on the road, we saw what looked to be a pale-skinned humanoid crouching on the side of the road. From behind, you could see the spine of this creature poking out of its back, and it almost looked as if it was hunched over roadkill. I could see it turn its head in our direction as we passed it, but I didn't get a good look at its face. Before seeing that, I and my fiancé were very skeptical of the paranormal. Anyone else have an experience seeing humanoid-like creatures around Kentucky, Ohio, or West Virginia? My friend and I were planning to visit, and he humorously remarked that there was a homeless individual on the side of the road consuming a rotisserie chicken. The shifting road. So I'd like to start by saying I'm a skeptic by nature. I'm not sure what to make of all this, but I can't really reconcile my beliefs with my experiences. Also, I'm telling this story because of what happened last night, but I have to start about 16 to 17 years ago with my first experience on this road. I had a friend that experienced weird, unexplained, or otherwise spooky things all the time. It's something that happened her entire life and the entire time I knew her. Because of that, she was interested in paranormal stuff, and the interest rubbed off on me, I guess. Though, as I mentioned earlier, I'm skeptical. She and I used to take long drives in the country at night down spooky roads. We called them our ghost drives. Though nothing ever really happened on those drives other than us working each other up with ghost stories. One road that we especially liked going down was River Road. It was several miles out of town and wound along a river. Everything about this road feels right out of a horror movie. It's narrow, run down, and curvy, and there's a long stretch of the road that's forested on both sides with a tree canopy over the road before it opens into fields on one side. The trees press especially close in that canopied area. Not to mention there are several curves in the road that are so sharp you have to nearly stop the car to go around them. So the first experience was around 08 to 09. She and I were driving down that road at night, as we did often. But this time she was getting an especially bad feeling. As I said, she's sensitive to this sort of thing, and I trust her bad feelings when this happens. At first it was mild, but within a few minutes she was borderline having a panic attack. She told me I need to turn around right now. I pulled into the first driveway to go back the other way, and it was that house that seemed to be the source of her panic. She was screaming and crying as I tried to get out of the driveway as fast as possible. The house itself was especially spooky looking. Clearly abandoned for years, with broken windows, faded paint, a rotting out truck on the lawn, etc. She felt like we were being watched from the house. Though I admittedly didn't feel anything at the time. I got us turned around, and her panic eased the further we got from the house. The rest of the drive home was fairly calm but tense. The next day she was feeling a bit braver in the daylight and wanted to go back out to the house. So we drove out there, but as we approached, everything was different. The house was normal. No broken windows. The siding on the house was a clean sky blue. The truck in the driveway looked fairly new as well. This was a normal, occupied house. We drove up and down that part of the road a few times to make sure we didn't miss anything, but we were both confident that was definitely the right house. The paint color was the same, though obviously newer looking. It had the same wraparound front porch and a barn/garage in the back. It was the house, just newer looking. For years she and I talked about that. We never could explain it. I think that was the last time the both of us went down that road together. So now to last night's experience. A friend of mine texted me around 10 p.m. to ask if I wanted to drive out into the country and get pictures of the northern lights. We'd both missed it the night before, and last night was supposed to be the last night it would be visible at all in our area. I picked her up, and we went out to the middle of nowhere. I parked next to a cornfield, and we took pictures of the sky for a while. Nothing spooky happened, but we got some good pictures. I joked a few times about the eeriness of the empty country and started to tell a few stories of things that had happened, but she asked me not to until we got back into the car. Around 12:30 a.m. we got back to the car, and I proceeded to tell her about the drive down River Road back in the day. She was really interested and asked if we could drive down it. Enough time has passed for me that the creepiness of it all had mostly faded, so I agreed. It was a little out of the way, but a spooky drive seemed like it would be fun. It was a little after 1 a.m. when we pulled onto the road. Her immediate reaction was, "Ooh, I could see why you guys like driving down here." Last time I was on the road with my other friend, it was mostly her that was freaking out. I usually didn't get the bad vibes. But last night I started feeling it right away. We drove through the tree canopy part of the road and the part with the sharp turns, and I was properly nervous, but I wasn't downright scared. Once we got through that area, I said, "That's really the worst of it. The road gets more developed once we get further down." She responded, "No, it looks like it's pretty creepy up ahead too." That's when I realized she was right. There was another canopy of trees ahead, and the woods pressed really close to the road in that area. This was weird to me because the last time I'd been down the road, that area was only wooded on the side by the river. Cornfields and farmhouses should have been on the other side. But that's not what we saw. We kept going. The woods seemed to get thicker as we went. There were a few houses in the trees at first, but then they went away too. It was just woods and a winding narrow road. Every so often there'd be a break in the trees and an old rundown house or something, but mostly woods. And the wildlife was odd. I've lived in this part of my state for my entire life. We get deer pretty heavy this time of year, but nothing like I saw last night. Deer were absolutely everywhere. I don't know how many times I had to stop for deer to cross. Or raccoons. Or some weasel-looking thing I'd never seen around here before, and for every time we saw a deer, there were many more where we just saw the eyes through the trees. It was absolutely bizarre how many animals there were. The road continued on for much longer than I ever remember it being. I know it's been years since I've been down it, but I've probably been down that road 50 times in my life with my other friend. Nothing was familiar this time around. Before, there were a couple of curves in the road that you had to slow down a lot for. This time the road was absolutely full of spots like that. It was also much hillier than I ever remembered. Not to mention the rundown bridges, creepy white fences half in the trees, and at least once a flash of light in the woods we couldn't account for. The feeling I felt driving down this road was like nothing I'd experienced. I had full-body goosebumps for most of the drive. I didn't understand what I was seeing. I won't say it felt like we were back in time or anything, though it did distinctly look like that at times. But there was still the odd modern house and gaps in the trees. We finally reached the end of the road after what felt like forever. It ends on another country road that leads into a tiny town. I couldn't even begin to give a sense of how long we were on the road because it didn't feel like time worked while we were on it. We both were even nervously joking that we'll get back to civilization and find that weeks had passed or something. Initially we were going to go through the small town and get back to the freeway, but my friend wanted to go back the way we came. Keep in mind she'd never been down that road before, so while it was creepy to her, it wasn't as creepy as it was for me, having been familiar with what the road should look like. I agreed to back down the road but mentioned to her that I feel like we got lucky making it the first time, and I feel like we're pushing our luck now. But still, we went. This is where things take a turn for the truly bizarre. Not that anything weird happened the next time. In fact, nothing at all happened the next time. Because the road was exactly like I'd always remembered it. A few tree canopy areas, a few tight turns, but mostly farmland and houses on the non-river side of the road. It was also fairly flat compared to the first drive. The animals were still dense, but not as much as the first trip down the road. One thing that stood out to me on the drive back was the lights in the windows of the houses. By now it was around 2 a.m. on a weeknight, and every house had every light on in their house. As if every homeowner on River Road knows something isn't right, and they don't want to sleep in the dark. By the time we made it back to the other side of River Road, my friend was also properly as freaked out as I was. The whole time we were pointing out different areas that we knew weren't there during the first trip. There was even a branch on a tree that hung down low over the road that I would have had to avoid on the first drive if it had been there. But it hadn't been. The last thing I'll say is this. I've never had a creepy feeling about my apartment. It's a pretty new complex in the city, right by a mall. Nothing you'd ever think of as haunted. By 4 to 5 times today I've heard a random knocking sound coming from the other side of the place, and every time I check there's nothing there. And when I was in the kitchen earlier, the sound came from right behind me. I quickly turned around but couldn't for the life of me figure out what made the sound. I'm more than a little concerned that I've brought something back with me. I guess time will tell. Okay, so I was tootling across the country, mostly driven by the quest to find pretty shit. I'm not a hard driver, and I'm not about getting from point A to point B quickly. I like to get about 3 hours of driving in a day. If I push, I can do 5, but that's really my limit. I also don't want to drive at night. One day I was getting to my end point, and evening was setting in soon. I stopped at a truck stop and was deciding if I should push on or sleep the night. The goal was to get to this campground with some cool rock formations and a river. I wish I could remember what it was called. It was something dreadful, and I should have taken that into consideration. But my quest for pretty shit was winning out. I decided to push on because I would make it there just in time for sunset and then could spend the next day relaxing there. The name of the place was something like Murder Rock, which is located near Ambush Campground. I don't know what I was thinking. I get to the campsite, put my money in their trust deposit box, and make my way to the park. It was winter time, so there was snow on the ground, but the roads were clear. No other campers were anywhere to be seen. I park and hop out for some cool sunset photos but don't explore too far, as it will be dark soon enough. Going back to my vehicle, I find the washroom. Oh, a flush toilet, what joy. I go in, take care of business, and then look around. They have showers too. Nice. I turn on the shower to check if it works and provides hot water. Suddenly I hear voices clearly outside the bathroom. One says, "He went in here." The other says, "Okay, let's wait." I figure it's the camp attendant making sure I paid and whatnot. I turn off the shower head and open the door, and no one is there. I look in the snow, no footsteps, but there is a door to the other washroom. But I feel uneasy and decide I should head back to my vehicle. I get to it and do a quick scan for footprints around my space, only mine. Okay. I climb in and just feel so unsettled. I definitely heard voices that clearly articulated words. I would like to rationally suggest that the noises I heard were caused by air bubbles in the pipes. But pipe noises are not English words. Some sat there for a little and tried to relax and shake it off, but I could not. I sent some notes to friends just to get a feeler for how freaked out I should be. Everyone agreed I should be freaked out and that I was dumb to go to Murder Rock in Ambush Campground. One friend called me and talked me out of the situation. She said, "Here is what I need you to do. Can you see the driver's seat?" I said yes. "Okay, do you have keys?" "Yes." "Can you get to the driver's seat with your keys?" "Yes." "While I am on the phone with you, I want you to get into the driver's seat and start the bus." "Okay, I got it started." "Great, now put it into gear and drive out there." I went back to the truck stop and had a comfortable sleep. But dang, that freaked me out so much. I was relieved when my friend suggested taking small steps to help me overcome my fear. The dead on the roadside. This is an experience that I had in one city. It is the reason I drive straight through when I am traveling on the I-10 in the USA. My family was traveling to Austin, Texas, to visit in-laws. Our route took us through El Paso. We arrived on the outskirts of the city at about 8 p.m. that night. I asked my husband to stop. I told him that I needed to stop and that I could not go through that city in the dark. He listened to me. From about 10 miles outside of town, I was overcome with a terrible feeling of fear and dread. Apologies to residents of El Paso. It was so strong that I asked my husband to stop at a motel that was just outside of town, before the first small hill, for the night. He wanted to drive through. I said, "Please. Stop here." He knew something was up with me. I will tell you once we get to Austin. My husband knew that I had been excited to see El Paso because my great-uncle was an outlaw in the 1880s. He had been quite the criminal. He was the skeleton in our family's closet. I knew he had fled to El Paso, and he disappeared into Juarez every time he heard that the law was on his trail again. So, I wanted to see the geography there, really. But, we stopped. My husband and kids went to go swimming. I took some time to shower and to try to shake that feeling of horror off. The next morning, I asked him not to stop for car gas or food until we got out of there, out of El Paso. I asked every angel willing to come to protect my children from what was there. I asked every higher-up volunteer I could think of to surround our car so that it would be safe. I went all Catholic crazy. My rosary came out of my pocket, and I prayed for them. I guess this account is my wake-up call to say a few novenas for those souls. I feel as if I forgot them for a while. From the moment that we entered the city itself, I saw dead people on both sides of the road. I saw them standing on the hills of Juarez City. I felt their grief and anger and despair. Ended victims. Victims, everywhere. Some covered in dust. I saw some of them, and I felt more of them. I prayed like I was saying 24 hours of novenas. I had felt this coming since we had stopped to visit Tombstone, Arizona. That entire trip was full of encounters for me. So many souls. So much fear and grief and anger and sadness. It overwhelmed me. So, I prayed and I cried. My kids were watching movies in the back of the car, and I was grateful for that. Once we reached the open road, I felt the emotions subsiding. I did not tell my husband what I saw or felt until later in the day. Did my subconscious remind me of the circumstances in that city, or did the dead want me to feel the intensity and loss of the civil war raging in those border towns? I do not know. I only know that I traveled through a place with beautiful buildings, an enormous and picturesque stadium, history galore, churches and historical streets, and lovely sights, but the spirits of the dead were everywhere, marring the view for me. We took a different route home. I 40 believe. A truck passed through my car? About a year ago I worked at a summer camp here in Washington State, in the Silverdale/Poulsbo area if you're wondering. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was driving back to camp after visiting my family on the weekend. I was driving on a 4-lane highway with a wide natural barrier/ditch in the middle, which separated the opposing sides of the road. As I drove along this familiar highway, blasting my music and singing along while enjoying the drive, a big pickup truck unexpectedly passed me on my left side, despite the fact that I was in the left lane next to a wide ditch. Keep in mind, I was driving in the left lane, so to my left was the big divider ditch. I'm still weirded out of my mind at this because, 1, the lane on my right was clear and the highway was relatively clear as it usually is on a Sunday afternoon, and 2, there's just no physically possible way for this truck to pass me on my left without falling into the ditch. It really seemed as if the truck passed right through the middle of my car. I might have just wrongly estimated the size of the shoulder, but like I said, I know this highway like the back of my hand, so I doubt it. I didn't feel anything that I'd say was paranormal per se, it was just super weird and confusing, and I still have no explanation. The truck just pulled into my lane after it passed and drove off and out of sight. I know it's pretty anticlimactic, but hey, I just wanted to share. I hope you enjoy it. You are welcome to ask me any questions for clarification or anything else you want. Skinwalker encounter. My wife and I are driving home from a fast food restaurant, taking a road we always take, nearly several times a day, because it is a shortcut. It's nighttime, of course. Seemingly out of nowhere, on the right side of the road, there is a small dog that looks like a husky but with really shaggy hair. It is staring downward at the swathe of road in front of it and appears not to notice the cars flying past. Here's the kicker, it had antlers. They were about twice the height of the dog, sticking straight up in the air and covered in white fur, the shade of the lightest parts of its fur. My wife and I both basically ducking scream, and as soon as we pass it, as soon as it leaves the view of the passenger side window, I look in the side view mirror, and it's not ducking there. Look behind us, it's not there. So we're losing our minds, like, did you see that? It had antlers. And we're freaking the duck out. I keep turning around to look in the back seat of the car because although I don't know much about skinwalkers, I know something about spirits, and I know that sometimes they like to hop in the car with you as you pass them. We get like a quarter mile away and decide to turn back and investigate, drive past the spot where we saw it with all of the windows up. Well, there it is. It's lying down by the side of the road licking up some roadkill. But the goddamn antlers are gone. We circle back again and inspect the side of the road, which is hilarious because we've driven on this road nearly every day, several times a day, for 3 years. There are no large sticks nearby that could explain the antlers. Furthermore, even if it were a stick, it would have to be a bleached white stick in the literal shape of antlers, and the climate we live in does not ever bleach sticks. There are no road signs, nothing around that could have possibly been mistaken for antlers. Needless to say, my wife and I both know what we ducking saw. We were not on any drugs or alcohol. It was as clear as day, what we saw. Then, the usual routine follows. A friend comes over to stay the night to help alleviate our fear, we set the alarms, and we perform a cleansing and protective ritual to the best of our ability. We use various items for the ritual, including sage, cedar, palo santo, candles, crystals, pure gold, rosemary, dirt, and written intentions. And we just do everything we can think of for about an hour. When it's done, We all feel lighter and like we can breathe, and whether you believe it's a placebo effect or a psychosomatic manifestation, we felt better. Everybody we know says it was a skinwalker. True stories from when I drove a truck over the road. Around 2005, I picked up a load of office chairs and went to Maine. I was quite psyched because it was the end of summer, and that was my first time going to Maine. I wanted to see it really bad. The load I picked up was going to the northwestern part of the state. I honestly can't remember a single town anywhere near there, unfortunately. I called the receiver and got directions, much more reliable than GPS, especially back then. I made my way into Maine, and it was just as beautiful as I imagined. The forests were amazing, and passing by a lake with a mountain behind it was breathtaking. I got within what I calculated to be about 45 minutes from the receiver the night before my delivery date, so I found a nice big cutout outside of some town. I parked for the night and called friends and family to rave about the area's beauty. Early the next morning I woke up, walked around the truck, peed, and took the biggest breath I could take through my nose to smell the woods. I highly recommend this experience. I hopped in and got rolling. I followed the directions given to me, and the road slowly but surely got smaller and smaller. I found myself driving very slowly, simply admiring the nature, when I approached the last road I needed to take. It looked freshly blacktopped. I turned onto it and thought, wow, the company must take care of this road. I followed it for about 2 miles and came to a fence and gates. I didn't realize, but it must be a private road. That didn't raise any red flags because that happens more often than people think. This fence was a solid 10 high with razor wire on top. The gate was a sliding type that moves along tracks attached to the fence. The gate opened, and 2 guys came out of the little guard shack. I was pretty shocked to see 2 plainclothes guys with, I'm assuming, AR-15s and sidearms. I assumed that an M4 likely indicates military personnel or contractors, but I had not yet made any connections to that. They checked my paperwork, searched my truck, and confiscated my license, phone, and camera, and handed me a badge that said visitor. They told me where to park, and a few guys would unload the chairs. They informed me that I could use a fob to access the doors, and that there was a cafeteria where I could eat, which would provide me with free breakfast. I thought, hell yeah, distract me with food. Works every time. I looked at the building, and it was just a little white, 1-story building with no windows and 1 set of doors. That was strange, but I just ignored any creepy feelings I had. I went in, ordered a full breakfast with OJ, and sat down. I was looking around when I noticed an elevator. Its doors were white and blended in well with the white walls, white floors, and all the fluorescent bulbs. About that time I saw the elevator doors open, and 3 or 4 guys walked out wearing lab coats and stopped and stared at me for a second. I wasn't out of place in Chuck's basketball shorts and a t-shirt. They asked if I was the guy who brought the chairs in. I told them, yeah, I was the delivery driver, and I asked them if they were having a good morning. One of them looked at his watch and chuckled, saying, wow, it is morning already. I don't know why that always stuck out to me, but it's one of the few specifics I do remember. Then, one of the guards entered, informed me that my trailer had been unloaded, handed me a signed copy of my bowl, and instructed me to leave. I left with nothing happening. I never went back, and I don't know if anyone had to deliver other stuff there. On my way out, I was looking along the fence line to see how far it went into the woods, and it seemed to go on forever both ways. At that moment, I began to feel an eerie sensation, as if the place were sinister and that negative events likely occur there. It is strange how our memories enable us to recall tiny details of seemingly unimportant things, while at times we struggle to remember the name of a town. So here's an encounter I had about a year ago when I was driving back home on an empty road with no structures or facilities for miles. First things first, I lived in Arizona at the time, around the Phoenix area. Traveling from Phoenix to one of the outer cities typically involves driving several miles without encountering any structures or facilities. I had to travel out of the city for a conference about an hour and a half away. I took the most direct path on the way there, but on the way back I was traveling around rush hour time. I know how the traffic works there, and I knew that if I took the main highway, the usual 1.5 hour drive would turn into a 2 or more hour drive. Currently, I have 2 routes to get home. The first route involves dealing with a ton of traffic, resulting in a 2-hour drive. For those who like numbers, the direct route is roughly 80 miles. The other would be no traffic, 150 plus miles, at all until I reach about 5 miles within my neighborhood. So I said, okay, you know what? I got enough gas in my truck, that route is somewhat more scenic anyways. Although the scenery consisted mainly of desert and some bushes, I believe an open road is always preferable to a crowded one. I hated traffic in the city, but this route would take the same time as the other during rush hour. So before I started my drive, I added about 3 gallons of gas as a precaution. I didn't want to run short on fuel since I had never driven this route before and was only familiar with the other one. I visited a gas station, purchased some bottled water and snacks, and subsequently commenced my return journey. When driving, I thought there would be more people taking this route since everyone traveling back into the city would be taking that direct route. Upon commencing the drive, I observed approximately 3 or 4 vehicles, which I subsequently overtook. The posted speed limit was 75 miles per hour, and these individuals were traveling at 70 miles per hour, so I overtook them. After about 30 minutes of driving, I was quite far down the highway and not paying much attention to my surroundings. However, I realized that I hadn't seen any structures for the last 10 minutes. After another 20 minutes, the only structure I had seen was a tiny abandoned building located about 5 miles behind me. You could tell it was completely empty and had the typical graffiti. There are no cars, people, or vehicles, there is simply nothing else there. When I was driving, I noticed a heavyset man wearing some blue jeans and a striped polo, with, a black ball cap on and some boots. He looked as if he were just getting off work, and he was standing directly next to the road facing it with his hands in his pockets. He was kind of in a little bit of tall grass on the side of the road. Now I could not see this man's face. I figured it was just because of his ball cap, but I could tell he was looking at me as I came down the road. His head was directed towards me the minute I saw him on the horizon and as I passed by him. This was all the experience. I just saw the man and saw his clothes, but I couldn't see his face. I started thinking, is he hitchhiking? Is he stuck out here? How did he get out here? As I saw him on the horizon, I also started looking around to see if maybe he had a car and was stuck, but as I could see, there was none. Not on my side of the road, not on the other side, it was just him. The last structure I saw was pretty far behind, and even there wasn't anything. This man was by himself, dressed in what looked like his work clothes, just looking at me as I drove by. After driving by, I kept looking in my rear view and never saw him move until I couldn't see him anymore. It was just so bizarre to see this man in an open, untouched area. No working fields, buildings, or facilities. Dyer Lane, California. Okay, so I literally live 5 minutes from Dyer Lane. I have lived here for 17 years now, and I have been up and down that road at all times of the day and night, walking, biking, or driving. One of my friends used to actually live on Kasser Road, the road with the farms. In the entire 17 years I have lived here, I have had numerous paranormal experiences in my own home, infamously known for being haunted by a lot of people who have been to my house. With that being said, I had never experienced anything before at Dyer Lane until April 20, 2018. Indeed, I was among those who would narrate the spooky tales of Dyer Lane to individuals who were unfamiliar with it, purely for the amusement of evoking fear. To be fair, my older brother told me those stories, so I continued the tradition of sharing the tale of Dyer Lane in our town. I have done a lot of research on the paranormal or odd events that have happened around that road, and I have come across a few different findings. 1. Back in the 1930s, 1940s, a group of KKK members used to have their meetings out on one of the farms out there and may have, no actual recorded proof, hung a few people out there of various ages. 2. In the 1960s, a group of high school girls formed an occult group that used to perform their rituals out in the cow fields. One source claims that one of the cult members lured her sister into the field and used her as a human sacrifice to summon a demon. 3. Numerous sites have actually reported UFO activity out in the fields. There are dozens of reports of a football-shaped object appearing in the sky and disappearing as well. That has actually been reported as recently as 6 months ago. 4. This one ties into the cult thing, but sources stated that a farmer was out in the field when he heard cult-like chanting. Somehow he fell off his tractor and managed to get run over by it? This one I'm not even 50% sure I believe it. It's just what I have found. With all those stories being said, I kind of grew up believing the tales of Dyer Lane were a bunch of baloney. However, what I am about to share explains why I am sharing here. I had to tell someone. My friend, call her A, had never heard the stories or seen Dyer Lane. So I figured, what the heck? I first took her down last week, before 4:20, at around 2 p.m. It was a nice sunny day, and during the day the road is actually a very pretty sight. I parked my car at the first bend, and we got out to walk about halfway down the road and back. Nothing extraordinary occurred during that day. There was a significant amount of traffic, but it was nothing out of the ordinary. Fast forward a few days to Friday, April 20, 2018. So, I am getting stuff from my house to stay at A's house for the night, and it is about 9 p.m. For shits and giggles, I was like, hey, "Want to drive down Dyer Lane? You said you wanted to go at night." She happily agreed. Having lived here so long and knowing Dyer Lane is literally within 5 miles of 3 high schools on a national stoners holiday, I figured there would be a ton of traffic on that road at night. I was wrong, it was dead. So, I turned down from Watt Avenue to Dyer Lane, and it was pitch black, so I turned on my brights to see. When we first turned down the road, there was no one else there. About a quarter of the way down the road we saw tail lights ahead of us. The closer we got, the slower the car in front of us started going. Also, the closer we got to the car, it was a green SUV, kind of old, the hair on the backs of our necks started to stand up. We make it around the first bend, and the car is maybe going 5 miles per hour. You can see people in the car but can't make out any features at all. The car starts to pull to the side of the road to let us pass, but everything inside of us is screaming not to pass the car. Also, I forgot to mention that I had my window down the whole time, and A had her window cracked, but not down. We approach the second bend, and literally everything inside me is screaming to not follow the car anymore since Kasser Road is darker than Dyer Lane. So instead of following after the car that had already turned and disappeared into the darkness, I started to turn around at the bend. I just finished backing up, and my window is almost facing Kasser Road when an overwhelming feeling of someone approaching my car came over me, causing me to turn my head to look down the road at Kasser Road when I saw a tall, black figure running at my car. Not humanly running, if that makes sense? It was moving in a direct line. No footsteps were really heard since I had the radio on, but it was moving inhumanly fast. I instantly floored it back down the road towards the first bend. Neither A nor I said a word right away. I noticed out of the corner of my eye that A hesitated in wanting to roll her window down but rolled it back up. I then spoke up, "Did you feel that?" She looks at me, a bit pale. "You mean the figure?" I just kept my face forward as I turned back onto Dyer Lane, and the entire air around the road was dark and heavy. You could feel that something didn't want you there. I rolled my window up before I turned back on Dyer and tried to drive as fast as I could. We both felt something intensely breathing down our necks. I didn't tell A about the figure I saw. She told me about the feeling she had about a figure approaching the car. That's when I told her what I saw. I haven't been back to Dyer Lane since. Now, mentioning that I have been living in a haunted house, I have grown a bit sensitive to paranormal things. It's not something that I asked for, but I have grown accustomed to it. The older I get, the more I notice and get used to seeing. However, whatever I saw on Dyer is something I have never felt before. I haven't been able to get it out of my head. The same thing happened with another entity I have felt in Citrus Heights at a burned down house. I'm actually happy I'm not the only one to have an experience on that road. It had never happened before, and I used to go camping in the backyard of the house of my friend who lived on Kasser for years, and that was an experience in itself. I would love some feedback from anyone on my experience. Creepy ghost/creature sighting. So, I wanted to share this story because it's been on my mind for a while now, and I'm curious if anyone else has a similar experience or story. Florida. About 10 months ago. As aircraft maintainers on fighters, we work 3 shifts. Oftentimes we're working outside for the duration of our shift in all elements and weather. I was an A1C, E3, in the Air Force, just about to hit SRA, E4. It was the middle of August in Florida. Temperatures during the day were constantly anywhere from 90 degrees to 105 degrees and humid as hell. During the mid-shift it was common for the temperatures to linger in the 90s with the thick humidity that felt similar to standing in a shower with the temp cranked to the hot setting. I was just moved to the mid-shift. This wasn't my first time being on the mid-shift, so the creepy nighttime on base was normal at this point. At that time, I worked in a neglected area of the base, which included many woods and old buildings that were either abandoned or in disrepair but still being used, despite having peeling lead paint, flickering lights, sagging ceiling tiles, and the smell of black mold and asbestos. Being on the night shift was always kind of creepy. The pitch-black darkness of a military base at night gives a real uneasy feeling. The buildings make weird noises with the creaking and cracking of the structures and cobwebs everywhere. If you're in the military, a contractor, or a vet, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I always expected to see ghosts or weird stuff at night but never did to my knowledge prior to this. Others and I disregarded anything weird as our minds playing tricks on us. Working nights, being fatigued from work, the hot weather/humidity, and sleep deprivation can make anyone susceptible to such ideas under these conditions. The first sighting. I had been on the mid-shift for a few weeks now and finally fully adjusted my sleep schedule to the new duty hours. At that time, as an A1C, I had a simple and safe commute of about 10 minutes to work since I lived on base. Eglin AFB is a massive base. The distance from the dorms to my side of the flight line is along a long highway that leads into a stretch of back road. This back road is a simple 2-lane paved road with a full-scale F-15 model at the entrance to the road. The simple back road is lined on both sides with tall and skinny trees, about 50 to 70 feet tall, and vegetation that is thin enough for a person to walk through comfortably but thick enough to be concealed within about 15 feet of going inside. On this back road there is about a car length of space before the trees start on either side of that road. The speed limit is 45 miles per hour. From turning onto that road to our hangar, the drive is maybe 1 minute of travel time by car. There are no streetlights or sidewalks, only roads and woods. Eglin AFB being so close to the ocean, the base frequently encountered thick sea fog that engulfed the entire area. At times, the fog was so bad that visibility was only 10 feet. On this night I was on my way to work following a late report time. It was about midnight and completely dark outside. It was foggy this night, but visibility was pretty good, maybe about 200 to 250 feet. My car had recently had a headlight go out that I hadn't tended to yet, but I had taken this road to work every single day for almost 3 years. I knew every inch of it. I imagined this shift would go as any other shift had gone the past few years. Driving on my way to work, I had the windows down and music cranked up as I normally do. There was no one else on the roads. I watched as the distant runway lights disappeared behind the growing foliage as I drove toward the F-15 that signified where I needed to turn right. As I turn onto the back road heading toward my squadron, I can't see any lights due to the small hill in the road that blocks the view. All I saw was the double yellow line in the road and dark green trees passing by me. Coming out of my turn, I start speeding up to match the 45 miles per hour posted speed on the road. I immediately notice a light tan-colored contrast against the foliage on the left side of the road about 200 feet in front of my car. At first this wasn't a huge surprise to me. I frequently see wildlife on base, black bears, gators, raccoons, opossums, and even dogs/cats. As I drive closer, the figure reacts almost like a deer in headlights and turns to the side, facing the road as if it were about to dart across. Growing up in the PNW, I'm used to seeing deer run across the road, so naturally I slowed down to avoid hitting it. The figure appeared to be the size of an elk, which I found extremely odd for Florida, especially considering that I had never seen a deer on base before. My curiosity grew, so I turned on my high beams to try and see what it was. Immediately the figure darted across the road from left to right with the speed of an elk in a full sprint. Then I realized that thing was nothing I had ever seen before. As it crossed my single headlight, I caught a good glimpse for about a second. It stood tall on all fours, about the height of the sedan I was driving. The creature's legs were extremely thick and muscular, like a mountain lion's. It seemed to have no tail and paws but moved like a deer or an elk. I'm about 50 feet away from this thing and coming toward it. The creature was so large its head was above the headlights. I couldn't make out the shape of the head or see if it had distinguishable features like antlers or specific ear shapes. I noticed the creature had a darker back compared to the rest of its body. As the creature cleared the road as I was moving forward at about 30 miles per hour, I looked out of my right window, expecting to be right next to it. I saw nothing, just the darkness, and I heard the rustling of large bushes that just sounded like a large boulder was rolling through a forest. I speed up as fast as possible to clear the area and turn into my works parking a few seconds later. I gather my lunch and reflective belt and speed walk into my squadron's hangar, checking behind me every few steps and looking off into the woods that surround where I work. I inform my coworkers about what I just saw and begin to consider whether I should warn the people working on the line about a dangerous animal in the woods or if I should call security forces to notify them. I try to calm down, get through my shift, and disregard the event as just a stray dog or deer that was on base. Working on the flight line that night, I couldn't help but stare into the dark tree line that was right next to where I saw that thing. I felt like someone, or something, was staring at me when I was outside the entire night. As the shift came to an end and the sun began to rise, the event was still on the back of my mind but not as apparent. I drove home on the road and watched as I passed each tree to see nothing special. I continued to report to work for the next few days on the night shift just as normal. I never saw that thing again. I ended up becoming less paranoid and forgetting the event. The second sighting. Fast forward a little over a week, and I had gained a new supervisor, staff sergeant, who I knew of by name but not by face or any interaction. He had come from another squadron and a different shop. We had been working closely for a few days doing normal aircraft maintenance. On this particular night, a few hours into the shift, we were sitting on the flight line waiting for another shop to help us complete a job. It's another foggy night, and we're all starting to get tired of waiting. My supervisor started talking to another NCO on the spot with us. That's when I overheard him say something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I looked up at my supervisor and asked him to repeat what he was saying so I could hear. He gave me a weird face and started to tell his story again. He said he was driving to work from off base, along the highway that runs just next to the outside of the base. There is a barbed wire fence and then thick trees that line the side of the base. He continued on and said, I happened to look on the side of the road when I was going about 90 miles per hour on the highway and saw this weird looking animal. I had asked him to describe the animal. He said, it was large and had a dark reddish back. I hunt all the time, and it was nothing like I had seen before in my life. I cut him off right there and asked him if the animal had thick legs like a mountain lion and no tail. His face dropped in shock. He asked me how I knew that. As I explained my story to him, he agreed with every detail. Our only disagreement was the coloring of the creature's back. I saw a dark brown, and he saw a very clear dark red coloring. Since that conversation, we have only brought the topic up between us once or twice. Neither of us has seen the creature again nor heard any stories about it. I found it incredibly weird that someone I had never talked to before had the same exact experience as me in a different spot with the same details. I had only told 2 other people about the experience prior to my new sergeant sharing his story. Neither of the people I told knew sergeant or knew he would be my supervisor. If anyone has a similar experience or knows what that thing could have been, please tell me. I've seen the black dog. There's a drop yard in Salem, Oregon. In the very back corner where my company keeps their empties, way up next to the border of the yard, which is made of about 100 yards of thick brush and sticks until it meets the I-5. I was there one night picking up an empty. It was a gloomy night. Very low hanging clouds. It had been raining off and on all day. You couldn't see the moon but could barely see its glow peeking through the thinner layers of cloud. The only other light was coming from the cars and trucks passing on the freeway and some generator-powered tower lights and their muddy reflections in the puddles scattered around the dirt lot. So I was out in the back, taking a leak like I normally do there. No one is ever there during the night. Of course by never, I mean very seldomly. So I was back there up next to the sticks, and I heard something moving around back there. Sticks snapping and leaves rustling about. My heart stopped because it sounded big. Bigger than any coyote, let alone a jackrabbit. I closed off my stream and stood in silence, listening intently to hear where the path of this animal was leading. I didn't even zip up so as to keep my presence unknown, assuming it didn't know I was there. That's when I saw them peering through the brush. 2 glowing yellow eyes staring straight at me. I felt a cold pierce through my body. I was frozen as my eyes were locked with the creatures. We stood there for what seemed like an eternity. Then it moved. It stepped its giant black paw toward me. I was still frozen but suddenly very hot, like I had just been thrust into a sauna. Then its teeth, his giant fangs slowly coming out as if it were smiling menacingly at me. Its fangs, oh God, its fangs. He was poised to pounce, and just as he was, a driver swung his truck behind me, and his headlights flooded the area. The dog fled as the driver yelled to me, "What the duck, man? Put your thing away." Help on a rainy road. Back in the late 1930s, my father and his brother built a little summer home for their mom, my grandma, on some land they owned in Beverly Shores, Indiana. For some reason, the area at that time was very popular with Polish Americans, and for my grandma and others of her generation, these homes seemed to serve as their American equivalent of a dacha, a place to relax, read, and just enjoy the rural life for a few weeks every year. Neither my grandma nor her best friend, who often stayed with her, drove, so once World War II began and the men in the family had gone off to war, my Aunt Mary was responsible for delivering them, their luggage, and my grandma's pet dog to the summer place, then picking them up when vacation time was over. The roads then were not what they are today. They were poorly marked and barely lit. Some weren't even properly paved and were more like dirt trails that rutted when dry and turned to muck when wet. That night, as my aunt headed toward Beverly Shores to pick up her mom and her friend, the roads were rapidly turning into mud due to a torrential rainstorm that started just as she was entering Indiana. Then, on one of the darkest stretches of road, a tire on my aunt's car blew out. Though she somehow managed to steer to the shoulder, it seemed inevitable she'd spend the rest of the night there unless by some miracle she managed to get the spare tire on. Now, Aunt Mary, about 30 years old at the time, was a feisty, independent, and somewhat unconventional lady, pretty comfortable around cars thanks to her brothers teaching her how to do light maintenance on them. In dry conditions, she would have been able to change that tire quickly and get back on the road, but that night not only was the rain blinding, but also her sedan was beginning to sink into the mud. Nevertheless, she bundled up, put her rain bonnet on, and went and got the spare and the jack out of the trunk, ready to give it a go. She successfully removed the flat tire but struggled to find a solid surface to brace the jack, which was making her increasingly irritated when a car pulled up from behind, its large headlights shining through the downpour. Today, many people might naturally be apprehensive, wondering if the person stopping was a killer who'd fortuitously come upon his next victim, but back in those days, they didn't seem to think like that. My aunt was just happy to have some help. The face of the man who got out of the car was mostly obscured by a pulled-down fedora and turned-up collar, so my aunt never really got a good look at him, but she remembered his voice as being low and pleasant. After assessing the situation, he immediately dove in to help, despite the fact his expensive trench coat and gloves got seriously soiled in the process. When he was done, my aunt both thanked him profusely and offered to give him some money, which he refused. But getting back in her car, she grabbed her purse anyway, pulled out a $5, and exited, intending to press the money into his hand and refused to take a no for an answer. There was no man or car on that isolated road. In less than a minute, both had disappeared. As he couldn't have driven past without her hearing it, my aunt wondered if he'd back down the road. But why would he have done that when he'd obviously been headed into Beverly Shores also? Despite the late hour and the rain, my aunt needed to solve the mystery of where her Good Samaritan had gone, so she slowly turned her car around and headed in the opposite direction, certain she'd encounter him soon enough. However, after driving nearly a mile, she still did not see him. Only then did she start getting what she called the creeps, a dawning suspicion that the man who so kindly helped her was not of this world. Though some who eventually heard the story suggested he might have been a guardian angel, my aunt tended to think he was someone who died on that stretch of road on a rainy night, reaching out to help a stranded stranger. Even as an elderly lady, she lived to be 94, she'd shiver a little at that thought. Reflections from the highway. Driving is easily the most boring part of my job. I work as a salesman for an all-in-one printer company. Business has been slow the last few years, with the rise of personal printers. But our loyal customer base has really helped us get through these troubling times. This is why I was at Garrison and Marcos, attorney at law, that day. I had been trying to sell them on the latest color all-in-one to replace their model, which was a few years old. They had sent me back to the office with a "we'll think about it," and I had started my 4-hour drive back to the office. That's how I came to be on the highway behind the truck in the first place. The sun was setting when I left the law firm, and by the time I got on the highway, it was already dark. I mingled with the other cars as we merged in with the big rigs that made the interstate their home. I was behind a particularly large 18-wheeler when I first noticed the thing. It started as a reflection. Have you ever noticed how an animal's eyes will reflect the light? Well, it was like that. I was sitting behind him with my low beams on when I noticed the sparkle from underneath the trailer. It was 3 or 4 small reflective points, and my mind just sort of obsessed over it. What could possibly be making those reflections? Some kind of axle? Or maybe something ornamental that the driver had stuck under his truck? It probably seems silly to obsess over something like that as you sit listening to my story, but when you're stuck in traffic out on the interstate, your mind searches for all sorts of things to occupy your time. Whatever it was about midway between the front wheels and the back wheels, too far under the truck for me to really make it out. I didn't think it was alive or anything, but it was a fun little mystery. I was stuck in gridlock. Some wreck up the way had brought us to a halt, and as I adjusted the radio in the beat-up old car they gave the salesman to drive, I found my eyes returning to that thing again and again. My brain just wouldn't leave it alone, and I began to create reasons for the thing being under there. Maybe it was for stability. Maybe it was something he had put under there so people didn't hit the back of the trailer in the middle of the night. Maybe it was just one of those stupid things people often hook to their trucks just because they can. Whatever it was, my mind had decided to obsess over it. I was watching it when my cell phone rang, and as I fished it out of my pocket, I found my eyes rising to see the thing as I said hello. "So?" my boss asked. "Can we go ahead and put them down for one of the new printers?" They said they would think about it, but they also said there was nothing wrong with their current printer, so I wouldn't expect to see an order from them. He sighed. "Damn, I was really counting on offloading a couple of these to the firm." "Did you tell them about all the added features?" "Of course I did, sir," and I was about to tell him that I was no rookie salesman when I looked up and almost dropped my phone. The thing I had been focused on for the last 20 miles had moved. It was subtle, but when you had been staring at it for as long as I had, you noticed these things. The thin fiber filaments had shifted somehow, and the pattern had changed. I was almost sure of it. I could hear my boss asking if I was still there, and I assured him that I was. I told him I would be back in the office in a few hours, and he told me to just head home. I could turn in my reports tomorrow. "Sounds like you could use the sleep. You're sounding a little jittery." I thanked him and told him I'd see him tomorrow before hanging up the phone and looking back at the thing under the truck. I could also see 6 surfaces reflecting back at me now instead of the 4 I had seen a moment ago. They looked even more like eyes. Whatever wreck there was up ahead, they must have cleared it out of the way. We were suddenly moving along at a brisk pace again, and I was glad for the shift in speed. My mind had suddenly turned what was likely some kind of ornament into something dangerous, and I really wanted to be from behind this truck. There was no chance of getting around them, though. The traffic was still pretty tight, and I was pretty well trapped between this 18-wheeler and the 18-wheeler behind me. So for the next 2 hours, we drove. The most nerve-wracking 2 hours of my life. The longer we drove, the more I convinced myself that it was no optical illusion. Whatever was under there was definitely moving, and it had quite a few legs that I could see. It was using 2 of the thinner ones to hold itself underneath the truck, and the other 6 or 8 or even 10 legs were anchoring it to the truck itself. What was worse were those all too reflective surfaces that I still thought of as eyes. They stared straight at me the whole time, and I began to believe that they knew I could see them. I shook my head the first time I thought this. I was tired, I had had too much coffee, and I was just seeing things. These were the excuses that ran around and around inside my head, like a dog chasing its tail. I didn't want to believe that I was stuck behind a truck carrying a very different sort of cargo. I wanted to believe that I was just seeing things, that I was making things up to pass the time. That sort of delusion only lasted until the thing started moving closer. You see, the longer I watched it, the longer it watched me. I don't know if it knew that I could see it, but it didn't seem to like the level of scrutiny that I was giving it. It sat midway between the cab, watching me like a predator watches its prey. The longer it went on, the less safe I felt inside my car. Something that big could surely get in through a window or break a windshield. And I would have nowhere to go in this gridlock, but I was still trying to be rational, trying to be realistic. There was no way that whatever it was alive. It was a trick of the light. It was just my mind playing tricks on me. When I finally got home, safe behind the door of my apartment, I would laugh about how silly I had been and feel really stupid. I was a grown man behind the wheel of his car, jumping at shadows. I began to use this idea as a security blanket, wrapping myself in it so I didn't just go crazy right there behind the wheel of my car. That was when it moved. The reflective eyes shifted suddenly. I don't mean that they went out like a blink, I mean they shifted. 1 minute I was looking at it, and the next, it was sliding beneath the underside of the trailer. Suddenly, those eyes came closer. They were less than 10 feet from my car now, peering from under the trailer at me as I tried to maintain my speed. I know how that sounds, but it's the truth. Whatever it was had finally gotten tired of being watched, and it decided to get a closer look. I felt a sudden stirring of primal fear. This must have been what early man had felt when it encountered something it just didn't understand. When it saw the long teeth and heard the growl of some unknown predator. When it saw the all too intelligent eyes of an animal that was a little too human reflected in the darkness. When it came to realize that the safety of its cave could also be a trap. I imagine that it felt just as helpless as I do now. Helpless, but intent on living too. I tried again to convince myself that I was being silly. This was nothing more than a trick of the light. It was some errant spiderweb under the cab that my headlights were catching that had now come loose and was presenting itself as some sort of bogeyman for me to be afraid of. I suddenly knew how to alleviate this fear. I would flip my high beams on. High beams would show me the underside of the truck, and I could see what the source of all this fear was. I reached for the switch, my hands much less steady than I thought they should be, and wrapped my fingers around the knob. For a moment, I couldn't bring myself to turn the switch. Did I really want to know? Did I really want this thing to know that I knew? Once the monster in the closet knows that you know it's there, does it have any choice but to eat you? I shook my head and flipped the lights on. I know now that I shouldn't have done that. What was under the cab was not a spider web, but it was the monster I had feared it was. It was a spider the size of a large dog. It was easily 4.5 feet tall and was hunkered beneath the trailer's cluster of wheels. It looked at me upside down with its legs clinging to the metal, its fangs dripping some translucent liquid and clicking together very fast. It made a high, angry sound that I could hear from behind my closed windows, and the look it gave me on its far too expressive face was terrifying. My brain seemed to give me a choice between fight or flight, and in my cowardice, I chose flight. I pulled around the truck, pulling onto the soft shoulder of the road, and drove around it in the line of angry cars. Fortunately, there were no police officers in that line. There was an exit ramp not too terribly far from the truck as well, and I whipped onto the ramp and pulled away from the highway and into a small gas station about a mile later. It took me nearly 30 minutes to make my breathing regular, expecting that spider creature to attack my car any minute. When I had control of myself again, I drove home. It took an extra hour, but I took side roads and back ways the whole way. So often in these stories, there is a moment of horror that comes afterward. Some accident, a truck found abandoned on the side of the road, a dead body in a truck stop, but there was none of that for me. I never heard a news report alluding to anything strange or anything out of the ordinary. I could almost forget about it until I close my eyes and see those far too expressive eyes looking at me as the high beams pin it to the underside in their lights. I take back roads whenever I travel now, avoiding the highways at all costs. I avoid big rigs as well. I don't ever want to see anything like that again. I thought I saw a skinwalker a couple of miles east of Raymond, Nebraska, one night driving with my boyfriend. It was coming down one of the hills, where a flashing yellow light used to be, allowing drivers to see about a mile ahead as they approached another hill with a church on the right side of the road. If you know the area, you may know what I'm talking about. Anyhow, my boyfriend and I are chatting, and as I look away from him to look out the front window, my blood goes cold, so I immediately go quiet. I saw what looked to be a large, human-esque creature that scurried across the road, right to left, south to north across the road. It moved very strangely. Animalistic, but human. It was dark, around 10 p.m., which made it difficult for me to see it clearly because of the time and its rapid movement. The distance between the two hills I mentioned was approximately a mile. I exclaimed to my boyfriend, who was driving, "What the duck? Did you see that?" And he claimed he did not see it. We drove past where I saw the suspected skinwalker cross, and I tried to glance that way but found myself frozen. As we continued on and turned right at the blinking light to head back into the city, I refused to mention what I had seen only being because cryptids already intrigued me, and I had read that you shouldn't even mention the name skinwalker out loud, especially at night, as it could call them to you in some beliefs. I also knew that they weren't commonly heard of in Nebraska, so I'm not even sure if what I saw is what I claim it to be. After driving a few miles down the new road, I finally told my boyfriend what I thought I had seen. I have never seen anything like it before, but I do know that the energy in the car after seeing it was very low for quite a while. When I was 18, I moved to Virginia Beach, VB, from the Eastern Shore, and I was surprised by how many people in Virginia Beach didn't know where the Eastern Shore was. I was trying to attend AJU, but I dropped out because I was working so much to pay for rent, and it all became too much for me at the time. Well, I was working at the Super K on Holland in the electronics department. Probably around 2004. I actually really liked working there, and my coworkers were freaking great. One night, they told me the legend of Mrs. Wobble. I can't remember the whole thing, but I'm sure others on this will fill me in about that local legend. Well, I love spooky shit and being scared, so I kept the name Elbow Road in mind. So one night, after a particularly long week at work, I go home, and my roommate, who was a cashier at the same Super K and whom I had known since kindergarten, had invited a mutual friend over from our hometown. We all had had a stressful week and decided to go for a joyride. I had remembered Elbow Road and thought we should head there. Plus, at the time, there was nothing around Elbow Road, so it would remind us of the shore and the joyrides we would take back home. So at 2 o'clock in the morning, we go. We laugh. We have a great time. But after we drove down Elbow Road and saw nothing, we were really disappointed. I remember turning right at that intersection on the Chesapeake side and starting to head home. I lived between Wichita and Newtown. Now, one thing about me is that I'm a human GPS, I know how to get around no problem, and I knew how to get home to my apartment even though I'd only been there a year. This is important because somehow, without making another turn, I was back at the beginning of Elbow Road. This creeped me out a little. It felt like lost time or something. The girls, my friends, realized it too and got even more uneasy. They urged me to turn around. But since there isn't really any development along the road, or wasn't then, I wasn't really sure how to turn around. That problem was soon solved. As I turned the namesake bend in the road by Stumpy Lake, we all saw two glowing eyes in the road reflected from the headlights. The girls started screaming, and I started laughing, and I mean this with all honesty, I don't think I've laughed as hard in the 20 years since. Because I saw that the eyes belonged to this little dog, and maybe because of the lights or the screaming, he turned and ran towards the side of the road out of the beams of the headlights. Well, the girls demanded I make a 3-point turn and go home. They'd had it. I noticed a patch of gravel off to the side of the road, which seemed wider and suitable for making a 3-point turn, so I decided to do it. However, when my beams tracked to the left, I saw that the dog was running toward a man. The man was dressed in a black hoodie with the hood up, khaki running shorts, and running shoes. The man was crouching down, snapping his fingers at the dog to have the dog come to him. But weirdly, I couldn't see his face even though the high beams were on and pointed directly at him. In that moment, it really ducked with me that he had no face, so I pulled my car, a '98 Trans Am, back onto the road and floored it. Now, I didn't think I'd seen a ghost, but a weird guy with no sense running at 2:30 in the morning. That didn't track really either because there wasn't a lot around the area. Seemed to me he'd have to walk for quite a while to the nearest house. And of all places, why run along that narrow road and at such a dangerous time? It didn't make sense. But it soon would. Several years later, I decided I was going to go back to college. I'd completed 2 years of community college and was trying to transfer to George Mason University in Fairfax, where I now live. I had an appointment with admissions to make sure all my paperwork was in order. Unfortunately, I arrived too early, so with an hour to spare, my sister, who had accompanied me, went to the bookstore. I'd settled on a book called Weird Virginia that was all about local lore and legends across the state. And sure enough, Elbow Road was there. I was interested in reading about Ms. Wobel, so I went directly there. At the end of her story, there were words I shall never forget, but she's not the only spirit who haunts Elbow Road, and she went on to tell a story about a jogger who'd been ended while walking his dog at night. The blood drained from my face. My sister turned to me and said, "I swear I'm not making this up, are you okay? You look really pale, like you've seen a ghost." I replied to her that according to the book, I had. I don't believe in ghosts, but I really can't explain what I saw. I'd like to think it was a guy trying to scare us, but something deep down tells me that's not true. A close call with a creepy truck driver. So this is probably the scariest thing that has ever happened to me. When I was 15, I was at a party/sleepover at my friend's house, which was about 15 miles from where I live. We had been drinking, which I wasn't really used to, so I got drunk pretty fast. I had been texting a boy that I was friends with from school that I fancied, and he also lived in this same village. It was around 2 a.m. when I decided to go meet him. I told my friends I wouldn't be long, and I started walking down the road trying to find the spot where he told me to meet him. I think I got to the spot, but I couldn't see him, so I decided to stand there and wait. I remember I was wearing a little cream-colored dress, and it was freezing outside. I see this lorry coming in my direction, and it starts slowing right down. I automatically start getting a bit freaked out but stupidly decide to carry on standing there. Eventually the lorry stops right in front of where I am, and I see this older man, he must have been in his 60s, just staring at me. I remember feeling so scared, but I freeze and get out my phone to text the boy I was meeting. I hear his lorry door open, and he starts walking towards me. At this point, I just started running as fast as I could back to my friend's house. I looked back, and he was just standing there in that same spot staring down the road. It scares me so much just thinking about what could have happened if I had just stayed there for a few seconds longer. I'm a long-haul trucker. I stopped for a lost kid on a deserted highway in the dead of night. What I saw attached to him, and the question he asked, is why I don't drive anymore. This happened a few years back. I was doing long-haul, mostly cross-country routes, the kind that take you through vast stretches of nothing. Those routes are the ones where the radio turns to static for hours, and the only sign of life is the occasional pair of headlights going the other way, miles apart. I was young, eager for the miles and the money. Didn't mind the solitude. Or so I thought. The route I was on took me across a long, desolate stretch of highway that ran between the borders of two large governmental territories. I don't want to say exactly where, but think big, empty spaces, many trees, and not much else. It was notorious among drivers for being a dead zone, no signal, no towns for 100 miles on either side, and prone to weird weather. Most guys tried to hit it during daylight, but schedules are schedules. Mine had me crossing it deep in the night. I remember the feeling. Utter blackness outside the sweep of my headlights. The kind of dark that feels like it's pressing in on the cab. The only sounds were the drone of the diesel engine, the hiss of the air brakes now and then, and the rhythmic thrum of the tires on asphalt. Hypnotic. Too hypnotic. I'd been driving for about 10 hours, with a short break a few states back. Coffee was wearing off. The dashboard lights were a dull green glow, comforting in a way, but also making the darkness outside seem even more absolute. My eyelids felt like they had lead weights attached. You fight it, you know? Slap your face, roll down the window for a blast of cold air, and crank up whatever music you can find that hasn't dissolved into static. I was doing all of that. It must have been around 2 or 3 a.m. I was in that weird state where you're not quite asleep but not fully awake either. Like your brain is running on low power mode. The white lines on the road were starting to blur together, stretching and warping. Standard fatigue stuff. I remember blinking hard, trying to refocus. That's when I saw it. Or I thought I saw it. Just a flicker at the edge of my headlights, on the right shoulder of the road. Small. Low to the ground. For a split second, I registered a shape, vaguely human-like, and then it was gone, swallowed by the darkness as I passed. My first thought? Deer. Or a coyote. Common enough. But it hadn't moved like an animal. It had been upright. My brain, sluggish as it was, tried to process it. Too small for an adult. Too still for an animal startled by a rig. Then the logical part, the part that was still trying to keep me safe on the road, chimed in. You're tired. Seeing things. Happens. And I almost accepted that. I really did. Shook my head, took a swig of lukewarm water from the bottle beside me. Kept my eyes glued to the road ahead. The image, though, kind of stuck. A small, upright shape. Like a child. No way, I told myself. Out here? Middle of nowhere? Middle of the night? Impossible. Kids don't just wander around on interterritorial highways at 3 a.m. It had to be a trick of the light, a bush, or my eyes playing games. I've seen weirder things born of exhaustion. Shadows that dance, trees that look like figures. It's part of the job when you're pushing limits. I drove on for maybe another 30 seconds, the image fading, my rational mind starting to win. Just a figment. Then, I glanced at my passenger side mirror. Habit. Always checking. And my blood went cold. Not just cold, it felt like it turned to slush. There, illuminated faintly by the red glow of my trailer lights receding into the distance, was the reflection of a small figure. Standing. On the shoulder of the road. Exactly where I'd thought I'd seen something. It wasn't a bush. It wasn't a shadow. It was small, and it was definitely standing there, unmoving, as my truck pulled further and further away. My heart started hammering against my ribs. This wasn't fatigue. This was real. There was someone, something, back there. And it looked tiny. Every instinct screamed at me. Danger. Wrong. Keep going. But another voice, the one that makes us human, I suppose, whispered something else. A kid? Alone out here? What if they're hurt? Lost? I fought with myself for a few seconds that stretched into an eternity. The image in the mirror was getting smaller and fainter. If I didn't act now, they'd be lost to the darkness again. God, the thought of leaving a child out there, if that's what it was. Against my better judgment, against that primal urge to just floor it, I made a decision. I slowed the rig, the air brakes hissing like angry snakes. Pulled over to the shoulder, the truck groaning in protest. I put on my hazards, their rhythmic flashing cutting into the oppressive blackness. Then, I did what you're never supposed to do with a full trailer on a narrow shoulder. I started to reverse. Slowly. Carefully. My eyes flicking between the mirrors, trying to keep the trailer straight, trying to relocate that tiny figure. The crunch of gravel under the tires sounded unnaturally loud. It took a minute, maybe two, but it felt like an hour. The red glow of my taillights eventually washed over the spot again. And there it was. A kid. I stopped the truck so my cab was roughly alongside them, maybe 10 feet away. Switched on the high beams, hoping to get a better look, and also to make myself clearly visible as just a truck, not something else. The kid was small. Really small. I'd guess maybe 6 or 7 years old? Hard to tell in the glare. They were just standing there, on the very edge of the gravel shoulder, right where the trees began. The woods pressed in close on this stretch of road, tall, dark pines and dense undergrowth that looked like a solid black wall just beyond the reach of my lights. The kid wasn't looking at me. They were facing sort of parallel to the road, just walking. Slowly. Like they were on a stroll, completely oblivious to the massive 18-wheeler that had just pulled up beside them, engine rumbling, lights blazing. They were wearing what looked like pajamas. Thin, light-colored pajamas. In the chill of the night. No coat, no shoes that I could see. My mind reeled. This was wrong. So many levels of wrong. I killed the engine. The sudden silence was almost deafening, amplifying the crickets and the rustle of leaves in the woods from a breeze I couldn't feel in the cab. My heart was still thumping, a weird mix of fear and adrenaline and a dawning sense of responsibility. I rolled down the window. The night air hit me, cold and damp, carrying the scent of pine and wet earth. Hey! I called out. My voice sounded hoarse, too loud in the quiet. Hey, kid! No response. They just kept walking, one small, bare foot in front of the other, at a pace that was taking them absolutely nowhere fast. Their head was down, slightly. I couldn't see their face properly. Kid! Are you okay? I tried again, louder this time. Slowly, so slowly, the kid stopped. They didn't turn their head fully, just sort of angled at a fraction, enough that I could see a pale sliver of cheek in the spill of my headlights. Still not looking at me. Still ignoring the multi-ton machine idling beside them. A prickle of unease ran down my spine. Not the normal kind of unease. This was deeper, colder. Animals act weird sometimes, but kids? A lost kid should be scared, relieved, or something. This one was. Nothing. "What are you doing out here all alone?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm and friendly. Like you're supposed to with a scared kid. Even though this one didn't seem scared at all. It's the middle of the night. Silence. Just the sound of their bare feet scuffing softly on the gravel as they took another step, then another. As if my presence was a minor inconvenience, a background noise they were choosing to ignore. This wasn't right. My internal alarm bells were clanging louder now. My hand hovered near the gear stick. Part of me wanted to slam it into drive and get the hell out of there. But the image of this tiny child, alone, possibly in shock. I couldn't just leave. Could I? "Where are your parents?" I pushed, my voice a bit sharper than I intended. "Are you lost?" Finally, the kids stopped walking completely. They turned their head, just a little more. Still not looking directly at my cab, more towards the front of my truck, into the glare of the headlights. I could see their face a bit better now. Pale. Featureless in the harsh light, like a porcelain doll. Small, dark smudges that might have been eyes. No expression. None. Not fear, not sadness, not relief. Just blank. An unreadable slate. Then, a voice. Small. Thin. Like the rustle of dry leaves. Lost. Just that one word. It hung in the air between us. Relief washed over me, quickly followed by a fresh wave of concern. Okay, lost. That's something I can deal with. Okay, kid. Lost is okay. We can fix lost. Where do you live? Where were you going? The kid finally, slowly, turned their head fully towards my cab. Towards me. I still couldn't make out much detail in their face. The angle, the light, or something was obscuring it, keeping it in a sort of shadowy vagueness despite the headlights. But I could feel their gaze. It wasn't like a normal kid's look. There was a weight to it, an intensity that was deeply unsettling for such a small form. "Home," the kid said, in that same thin, reedy voice. "Trying to get home." "Right, home. Where is home?" I asked, leaning forward a bit, trying to project reassurance. "Is it near here? Did you wander off from a campsite? A car?" There were no campsites for miles. No broken down cars on the shoulder. I knew that. The kid didn't answer that question directly. Instead, they took a small step towards the truck. Then another. My hand tensed on the door handle, ready to open it, to offer. What? A ride? Shelter? I didn't know. "It's cold out here," I said, stating the obvious. "You should get in. We can get you warm, and I can call for help when we get to a spot with a signal." My CB was useless, just static. My phone had shown no service for the last hour. The kid stopped about 5 feet from my passenger door. Still in that pale, thin pajama-like outfit. Barefoot on the sharp gravel. They should be shivering, crying. They were doing neither. "Can you help me?" the kid asked. The voice was still small, but there was a different inflection to it now. Less flat. A hint of something else. Pleading, maybe? "Yeah, of course, I can help you," I said. That's why I stopped. "Where are your parents? How did you get here?" The kid tilted their head. A jerky, unnatural little movement. "They're waiting. At home." "Okay. And where's home? Which direction?" I gestured vaguely up and down the empty highway. The kid didn't point down the road. They made a small, subtle gesture with their head, a little nod, towards the trees. Towards the impenetrable darkness of the woods lining the highway. "In there," the kid said. My stomach clenched. "In the woods? Your home is in the woods?" "Lost," the kid repeated, as if that explained everything. "Trying to find the path. It's dark." "Yeah, it's very dark," I agreed, my eyes scanning the tree line. It looked like a solid wall of black. No sign of any path, any habitation. Just dense, old-growth forest. The kind of place you could get lost in for days, even in daylight. "Can you come out?" the kid asked. "Help me look? It's not far. I can't see it from here." Every rational thought in my head screamed no. Get out of the truck? In the middle of nowhere, In the pitch dark, with this strange child, who wanted me to go into those woods. No. Absolutely not, but the kid looked so small. So vulnerable. If there was even a tiny chance they were telling the truth, that their house was just a little way in, and they were genuinely lost.
I don't think that's a good idea, buddy, I said, trying to sound gentle.
It's dangerous in there at night. For both of us. The best thing is for you to hop in here with me. We'll drive until we get a signal, and then we'll call the police or the rangers. They can help find your home properly. The kid just stood there. That blank, unreadable face fixed on me. But it's right there, they insisted, their voice a little more insistent now. Just a little way. I can almost see it. If you just step out. The light from your door would help. My skin was crawling. There was something profoundly wrong with this scenario. The way they were trying to coax me out. The lack of normal emotional response. The pajamas. The bare feet. The woods. I looked closer at the kid, trying to pierce that strange vagueness around their features. My headlights were bright, but it was like they absorbed the light rather than reflected it. Their eyes. I still couldn't really see their eyes. Just dark hollows. I really think you should get in the truck, I said, my voice firmer now. It's warmer in here. We can figure it out together. The kid took another step closer. They were almost at my running board now. Please. They said. That reedy voice again. My leg hurts. I can't walk much further. If you could just help me a little. Just to the path. My internal conflict was raging. My trucker instincts, honed by years of seeing weird stuff and hearing weirder stories at truck stops, were blaring warnings. But the human part, the part that saw a child in distress, was still there, still arguing. I was tired. So damn tired. Maybe I wasn't thinking straight. Maybe this was all some bizarre misunderstanding. I squinted, trying to see past the kid towards the tree line that indicated. Was there a faint trail I was missing? A flicker of light deep in the woods? No. Nothing. Just blackness. Solid, unyielding blackness. And then I saw it. It wasn't something I saw clearly at first. It was more like an anomaly. A disturbance in the darkness behind the kid. The kid was standing with their back mostly to the woods, facing my truck. Behind them, the darkness of the forest was absolute. Or it should have been. But there was something connected to them. Something that stretched from the small of their back, from under the thin pajama top, and disappeared into the deeper shadows of the trees. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, a weird shadow cast by my headlights hitting them at an odd angle. Maybe a rope they were dragging? A piece of clothing snagged on a branch? I leaned forward, trying to get a clearer view. The kid was still talking, their voice a low, persistent murmur. It's not far. Please. Just help me. I'm so cold. But I wasn't really listening to the words anymore. I was focused on that. That thing behind them. It wasn't a rope. It wasn't a shadow. It was a tube. A long, dark, thick tube. It seemed to emerge directly from the kid's lower back, impossibly, seamlessly. It was dark matte, like a strip of the night itself given form, and it snaked away from the child, maybe 10 or 15 feet, before disappearing into the inky blackness between two thick pine trunks. It wasn't rigid, it seemed to have a slight, almost imperceptible flexibility, like a massive, sluggish umbilical cord made of shadow. It didn't reflect any light from my headlamps. It just absorbed it. My breath hitched in my throat. My blood, which had been cold before, now felt like it had frozen solid. This wasn't just wrong. This was impossible. Unnatural. The kid was still trying to coax me. Are you going to help me? It's just there. You're so close. My voice, when I finally found it, was barely a whisper. I couldn't take my eyes off that appendage. Kid. What? What is that? Behind you? The kid flinched. Not a big movement, just a tiny, almost imperceptible tightening of their small frame. Their head, which had been tilted pleadingly, straightened. The blankness on their face seemed to solidify. What's what? They asked, their voice suddenly devoid of that pleading tone. It was flat again. Colder. That thing, I stammered, pointing with a shaking finger. Coming out of your back. Going into the woods. What is that? The kid didn't turn to look. They didn't need to. Their gaze, those dark, unseen eyes, bored into me. It's nothing, they said. The voice was still small, but it had a new edge to it. A hardness. You're seeing things. You're tired. They were using my own earlier rationalization against me. No, I said, my voice gaining a tremor of conviction born of sheer terror. No, I'm not. I see it. It's right there. It's connected to you. The kid was silent for a long moment. The only sound was the thumping of my own heart, so loud I was sure they could hear it. The crickets had stopped. The wind seemed to die down. An unnatural stillness fell over the scene. Then, the kid's face began to change. It wasn't a dramatic, movie monster transformation. It was far more subtle and far more terrifying. The blankness didn't leave, but it sharpened. The pale skin seemed to tighten over the bones. The areas where the eyes were, those dark smudges, seemed to deepen, to become more shadowed, more intense. And a flicker of something ancient and utterly alien passed across their features. It wasn't human anger. It was something older, colder, and infinitely more patient, now strained to its limit. The air in my cab suddenly felt thick, heavy, and hard to breathe. "Just come out of the truck," the kid said, and the voice. Oh God, the voice. It wasn't the small, reedy voice of a child anymore. It was deeper, resonant. With a strange, grating undertone, like stones grinding together. It was coming from that small frame, but it was impossibly large, impossibly old. It vibrated in my chest. "Come out. Now." The command was absolute. My hand, which had been hovering near the gear stick, now gripped it like a lifeline. My other hand fumbled for the ignition key, which I'd stupidly left in. "What are you?" I choked out, staring at the monstrous thing playing dress-up in a child's form, at the dark, pulsating tube that was its anchor to the shadows. The kid's head tilted again, that jerky, unnatural movement. The expression on its face, if you could call it that, was one of pure, unadulterated annoyance. Contempt. Like I was a particularly stupid insect it had failed to swat. And then it spoke, in that same terrible, resonant, grinding voice. The words it said are burned into my memory, colder than any winter night. "Why," it rasped, the sound seeming to scrape the inside of my skull, "the duck are humans smarter now." That was it. That one sentence. The sheer, cosmic frustration in it. The implication of past encounters, of easier prey. The utter alien nature of it. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I reacted. Primal fear, the kind that bypasses all higher brain function, took over. My hand twisted the key. The diesel engine roared back to life, a sudden, violent explosion of sound in the horrifying stillness. The kid, the thing, actually recoiled. A small, jerky step back. The expression, that awful, tightened, ancient look, intensified. I slammed the gear stick into drive. My foot stomped on the accelerator. The truck lurched forward, tires spinning on the gravel for a terrifying second before they bit into the asphalt. I didn't look at it. I couldn't. I stared straight ahead, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, the whole cab vibrating around me. The truck surged forward, gaining speed with agonizing slowness. For a horrible moment, I imagined that tube thing whipping out, trying to snag the trailer, to pull me back, to drag me into those woods. I imagined that small figure, with its ancient, terrible voice, somehow keeping pace. I risked a glance in my driver's side mirror. It was standing there. On the shoulder. Unmoving. The headlights of my departing truck cast its small silhouette into sharp relief. And behind it, the dark tube was still visible, a thick, obscene cord snaking back into the endless night of the forest. It didn't seem to be retracting or moving. It just was. The thing didn't pursue. It just stood and watched me go. And that, somehow, was almost worse. The sheer confidence. The patience. Like it knew there would be others. Or maybe it was just annoyed that this particular attempt had failed. I drove. I don't know for how long. I just drove. My foot was welded to the floor. The engine screamed. I watched the speedometer needle climb, far past any legal or safe limit for a rig that size, on a road that dark. I didn't care. The image of that thing, that child shape with its dark umbilical to the woods, and that voice, that awful, grinding voice asking its horrifying question, was burned onto the inside of my eyelids. I must have driven for an hour, maybe more, at speeds that should have ended me or arrested before the adrenaline started to fade, replaced by a bone-deep, shaking exhaustion that was more profound than any fatigue I'd ever known. My hands were trembling so violently I could barely keep the wheel straight. Tears were streaming down my face, not from sadness, but from sheer, unadulterated terror and relief. When the first hint of dawn started to gray the eastern sky, and my phone finally beeped, indicating a single bar of service, I pulled over at the first wide spot I could find. I practically fell out of the cab, vomiting onto the gravel until there was nothing left but dry heaves. I sat there on the cold ground, shaking, for a long time, watching the sun come up, trying to convince myself that it had been a dream, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. But I knew it wasn't. The detail of that tube. The voice. The question. You don't hallucinate something that's specific, that coherent, that utterly alien. I never reported it. Who would I report it to? What would I say? Officer, I saw a little kid who was actually an ancient cosmic horror tethered to the woods by a nightmare umbilical cord, and it got mad because I didn't want to be its dinner? They'd have locked me up. Breathalyzed me, drug tested me, and sent me for a psych eval. I finished that run on autopilot. Dropped the load. Drove my rig back to the yard. And I quit. I told them I was burned out and needed a break. They tried to convince me to stay and offered me different routes and more pay. I just couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that kid, that tube, those woods. Every dark road felt like a trap. I found a local job, something that keeps me home at night. I don't drive in remote areas anymore if I can help it. Especially not at night. I still have nightmares. Sometimes, when I'm very tired, driving home late from somewhere, I'll see a flicker at the edge of my vision, on the side of the road, and my heart will try to beat its way out of my chest. I don't know what that thing was. An alien? A demon? Something else, something that doesn't fit into our neat little categories? All I know is that it's out there. And it's patient. And it seems to have learned that its old tricks aren't as effective as they used to be. Why the duck are humans smarter now? That question haunts me. It implies they weren't always. It implies that, once upon a time, we were easier, that maybe, just maybe, people like me, tired and alone on dark roads, used to just step out of the cab when asked. And they were never seen again. So, if you're ever driving one of those long, lonely stretches of road, deep in the night, and you see something you can't explain, maybe just keep driving. Maybe being smarter now means knowing when not to stop. Knowing when to ignore that little voice telling you to help, because what's asking for help might not be what it seems. Stay safe out there. And for God's sake, stay on the well-lit roads.